we finally make it out of the 60th.
Yeah.
I don't even know how long we've been recording yet. Probably quite a while.
30 minutes.
Yeah. And we make it into, well, the Christmas special first. The Church on Ruby Road. Now,
I want to put this in an 8, I'm not going to lie. I really like it.
Here's the thing. This is going to be where we begin to disagree. Because, for me, this is on the weaker end of RTD2, personally.
Oh, really?
Let me explain why. Because I think it has some really good moments in it. But for me, there's something about the pacing in this one that's never quite clicked with me. And I'm not sure what it is. It's like, so you know the bit where they save the baby from the ship, the Goblin ship? That happens at like the 20-25 minute mark, right?
Yeah, that happens at the midpoint.
And then you just got like another 10 minutes of them just sort of walking around the flat.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love the bit where Ruby gets erased from time. Very kind of, It's a Wonderful Life type stuff. I love, that's really, really cool. Really like that.
Really well shot as well.
But there's just something kind of meandering to me about the opening sort of 10 minutes and that sort of 10-minute bit in the middle that just stops me from really like seeing this as like a fun, frenetic start that I think it's going for the most part.
I actually 100% agree. Modern Doctor Who has a structure to it, right? And that usually requires like a hook, opening theme, pre-titles, which I think this episode has a brilliant one.
Yeah.
Then it kind of has an introductory phase where you're introducing the characters and the world of the episode, which the world counts even if it's modern day Earth, right? Because modern day Earth can be different depending on the story, right? And then usually after that you have 3 or 4 set pieces. So it goes hook, introduction, set piece, set piece, set piece, set piece, right? That's usually the general structure of every episode of Modern Doctor Who. But this episode has a weird structure because there are added in scenes and then there are scenes cut because of Disney. So that moment that you were talking about before, which I found incredibly weird when I first watched it, where there's this weird, like very confusingly edited sequence in the aftermath of getting the baby where kind of nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Apparently the goblins are meant to follow them down. Yeah. So that's what that's.
Didn't they say they get like the budget like didn't stretch? Like there's supposed to be a scene where apparently they're like going through the apartment.
And that's why it's so large, because the Goblin King is meant to be at the end of it, and it's meant to be kind of similar to the set up top. But it just had to all get cut, and you can kind of see that.
It would raise this significantly for me. But as it is, it just feels like there's something missing from it, and I can't quite,
There is, and also the intrigue of the Doctor is completely ruined because Disney were like, "How about you insert this scene, which totally explains all the mystery."
See, again, I'm going to play slight
that scene is quite nice, right? It's a nice scene, but it goes against everything the episode is trying to do, right? The episode is trying to be like, oh, the Doctor's a stranger, he just shows up mysteriously. Who is he? If you've never watched Doctor Who before, you can probably be like, oh, who is he? And then he's like, this is a sonic screwdriver, this is the TARDIS, I'm the Doctor, I'm from space, right? And he says it to a random stranger, and it's very obvious Disney were like, wow, it's been a long time and the Doctor hasn't showed up yet.
Thing is though, alright, I get what you're saying about the flow and how it does break the flow of the mystery of the Doctor. However, I do slightly agree with the sentiment that we don't really see a lot of the Doctor very much for the debut episode. And the reason I think it's more of an issue with hindsight is because season 1, not through any fault of its own, but because of Gatwick's scheduling and everything, a lot of season 1 already feels quite Doctor-like. I do sort of understand the concern of, we want the audience to, connect to this character. This is our guy, this is the guy, this is the namesake of the show. And so, whilst I think you could have paced it better maybe, or maybe had it in a certain different order, I do sort of feel that scene is somewhat necessary in some form. Maybe you could change it about slightly, but because for me, that's one of the scenes for me with Gap where I went, oh, there's the Doctor, when he's like, I just got snowman and I'd like to go home, and he's just very dismissive of the police and all of this sort of stuff. And the marriage thing is really sweet.
But he's still kind as well, you know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah. And I think without that, I feel that you wouldn't really get much of a taste of this Doctor for the most part. You get a bit, don't get me wrong, there is good stuff in the rest of the episode, but I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? Because as well of how
I definitely do.
How much kind of a Gatwa drought there is in
Well, that's
season
why they
one.
gave the note, right? Like,
Yeah.
because there are real reasons. But when you hear Rusty Davies in like the behind the scenes saying, "Oh, I really wanted the moment where he jumps over the roof to be like really big because it's the first time you really see him like in action," and it's like he really obviously had to sacrifice some of his intention in the story
Mm.
to appeal to the overlords or whatever, however you want to characterize it.
Yeah, I do get it. I think,
But I
whilst I
still think it's a good
understand
episode.
that, I do think as a note, it's one of the ones where I'm like, I kind of agree, even though, obviously everyone's gonna have their own opinions on Disney and stuff, and like, this is one of the few times though where I will kind of say, I kind of get it, especially with the episodes that have happened afterwards. I do.
Well, there are probably like thousands of notes that we haven't seen.
Yeah, but of
You
the
know what I
ones that
mean?
we know about, this is one of the ones where I'm like, yeah. But that aside, I think another thing about this episode as well is, I think because of its proximity to Space Babies, I think both of these episodes have very similar feeling tones and kind of atmosphere, and it almost kind of feels like, not that one cancels out the other, that's not what I mean, but kind of like, I don't know, I think just having two baby episodes back to back is a weird choice, to be honest. Is one of my main sort of things. I get that it's like, because that's the whole thing with Ruby, that's her whole like mystery. However,
Yeah.
I'm sort of, do you know what I'm sort of saying? It feels a bit.
I do find it funny that Rusty Davies is the one to have so many baby episodes when he's been like very vocal in real life about how he finds babies like gross.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
that is quite funny. That is quite
Which
funny.
a lot of people find babies gross, right? And I kind of get it as well, especially in
I
space
like
babies with the
babies.
weird CGI mouths.
I've got a friend who like thinks that they're like, nah. He's like, it's just like a tiny person. I don't like it.
But yeah, you see baby geniuses and stuff, and it's like
Yeah,
freaks
sure.
people. Where do you want to rank this episode then?
See, the difficulty
No, just put it in
is,
pieces.
I don't think it's much. I don't. I would prefer Star Beast, to be honest.
Oh, really?
I think I do, yeah, because I think on a character level, I think it's doing more. I think it's got.
They're about equal for me.
Yeah, I think it's got about. I think directorially, I prefer the Star Beast slightly. I think the villain is way stronger. That's another thing. The goblins are fun, but they aren't really a great first antagonist. I wouldn't say. They're fun, but like I think the Meep. The Meep has had somewhat of a impact beyond just the fandom. I feel like people
I
would
think
sort
all
of
of the villains have been pretty
sure,
good this series, actually.
but like I think the Meep. There's something about the Meep particularly that did just click with people, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I just don't know whether for me, like, the Goblin King's fun. And also, that's another thing, like, I do... Oh, one thing I do want to give praise to, the family. I love the Sundays, love them to death. Cherry, she's great. I love them. And I think they get a good showing. I wish there was more of them. If that's one of... Like, not in this episode specifically, just the series in general. Because I really do like them. And I almost feel like we could almost do... I think that might be a symptom of the episode thing, but like more Jackie Tyler-esque scenes, where it's just there.
I liked how they showed up in Rogue as well.
Yes,
That was
yeah.
a good way to introduce
I
them.
did too, but like, if it were me, I'm putting Church in C, but if you want to put it in B, I'm not going to like...
Yeah, let's put it in B, just behind Star Beast.
Sure.
Like best of both worlds.
Sure. Space...
And this is one where we're definitely going to disagree, because I really like this episode. I know, no one agrees with me. I love it.
This one is tough, because this one is another one where I did see it slightly early, like through one of those same schemes. I promise, I don't get invited to these things, by the way. I just am very sad, and whenever they say that there's tickets for a thing, and because I live in Cardiff, I just end up at all these things. But, Space Babies, I don't think... Okay, here's the thing. I think when a new series comes out, there's a lot of immediate kind of hype for it, in the sense of, I think it gets... You build up a series in your head before it comes out, right? You sort of imagine it, the vision of the series, before it comes out. And I think a lot of people went into this episode sort of expecting the world, and then kind of forgetting what an average Doctor Who opener normally sort of is. That's not to say that this is the best one. I don't think it is. But I also wouldn't say that this is a million miles away from something like New Earth or something to that effect. I
When
think,
people say this is the worst episode ever,
yeah,
I can't lie.
I
I
don't
roll
agree
my
with
eyes,
that.
man.
I don't agree.
It's so like far clear of most Doctor Who episodes. I mean, I say most. Most people
Most
probably
might
wouldn't
be a
go
bit of
that
a
far with
stretch.
me,
Yeah, most
right?
might be a little
But
bit.
I think this is like at least an above average episode, so I can't say that it's the worst of all time, top 10 worst. I think this is like the lowest rated episode of Doctor Who on IMDb, if I'm pretty
That's
sure,
wild to me.
which is crazy,
Yeah, that's
right?
insane to me.
I mean, maybe the hate makes me like it more. I don't think so. I just think it's a good episode. You were talking about hype. I had negative hype for this series. As someone who
Mm,
somewhat enjoyed the 60th, and by somewhat I mean I did. I enjoyed all of them overall, but I've grown to like them more with time.
yeah,
When it was announced that these series would be coming out at midnight, I was like,
yeah.
oh
I
my
think
god,
that's
my
another
hype
part
went
of it, though. I think
so
that's another
down.
part of the hype, though. I think because obviously all of us we stayed up to midnight to watch it, and I think for a lot of older fans, if you stay up to midnight to watch something and it's Space Babies, something which I do think is largely fine, but is not really catered to the adult fan demographic, which, let's be honest, are
Yeah,
the
who are
ones that
going to
watch
be
it
the
at
people who
midnight.
stay up to midnight? Yeah.
Um, I think I can understand the reception being the way it was to a degree. With that in mind, I do want to say, because I mentioned to you earlier that my mum started watching with the 60th, she watched this series as well, and she didn't like this.
Oh,
She didn't. My mum's not a Doctor Who fan, but she just thought it was too silly and a bit too, like, she wasn't a big fan of the
fair enough.
Space Babies, I'm afraid.
Well, I think it's one of those things where the people around it, especially in real life, and this is just so true to me, where like if they don't like it, it can really like affect you and stuff like that. Like if your real life friends
mm,
really don't like an episode, or family members don't like an episode, right? And that isn't even like a thing where it's like, oh, you're not 100% impartial. It's like hell nah, none of us
I
are
don't think
impartial.
anyone is,
These
yeah.
things really do affect us, and that is perfectly fair. So like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna be like, no,
No, no,
your mum
totally.
is wrong. No,
Yeah.
obviously not,
No,
right?
totally.
That'd be crazy, right? But what is it? I will say when it comes to Space Babies, I feel like it gets a lot of unnecessary flack. I think when it comes to the response within the fandom, right?
Mm,
You know, like fans of the show, like actual good faith fans of the show, I understand why people don't like it. But what I will stand against are the kind of outsiders who act like it is the worst thing they've ever
yeah,
seen.
yeah.
There was an unparalleled wave of hate, right? I wasn't on Twitter in 2020, so maybe there was like crazy timeless child hate on Twitter. There was definitely crazy timeless child hate on YouTube, but it was nowhere near Space Baby. Even like the Star Beast was nowhere near Space Baby. Some of these videos were getting like multiple millions of views of just
Yeah.
like pure misinformation, pure hate. I remember there was a YouTube video. I'm not going to call names because I'm not a drama farmer, but they basically were
Sure.
going scene by scene of like why it's bad, and they were like making up shit. They were saying that, oh
Yeah.
my god, the sound is delayed in this scene, and it's like A,
Yeah.
it wasn't even delayed, and B, who the fuck cares? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, right? And they literally were so desperate to hate it. And there was clearly, you know, a bunch of people who were predisposed to hate it, and no matter what it was, they would have hated it. And
Mm,
as someone who went into it, I'll be honest, right? I was not expecting anything. In fact, I was kind of expecting to not like it. I remember I spoke
mm,
to my brother the day before it came out on the phone, and he said, "It's like, well, I'm gonna give it a shot, but I'm half expecting, you know, I had a kind of like bad premonition that I'm gonna be 5 minutes into it, and I'm gonna be thinking." This is like the worst thing I've ever seen. And I was like, oh no, please don't happen. And then I watched it and I was like, this is pretty good. This
Well,
is
here's the
pretty good.
thing. I think, talking about the episode a little bit, like, specifically, I think the opening 10 minutes, where it's just the Doctor saying all the Doctor things, and
Oh yeah.
they go see the dinosaurs and stuff, love all that stuff. I think that stuff's all really well played, really, really well done, and all that sort of stuff. The, like, plot itself, like, it's not particularly, like, deep, but also I don't think it needs to necessarily be. I think where it falls flat for me is, you know, like the messaging of like the Doctor being the last of his kind, right? And then
Mm.
that moral kind of transfers to the bogey thing. I don't know whether I quite like. Do you know what I mean? It feels a bit of a
I suppose. I
stretch.
mean,
You know what I'm saying?
I must confess, I really like this episode, and I think you say it's not that deep. I think there's more to it than meets the eye. There's a lot of
Okay.
things and themes playing below the surface. A lot of things to do with just like the structure of stories in general. I really like the idea of like the dark underbelly, and then the top of the ship and the bottom of the ship. There's a monster in the bottom, then there's babies, defenseless babies at the top. And a lot of the things they talk about, every story needs a hero. The way the whole story is structured kind of resembles all of that. I think the reason why I prefer this episode to say "End of the World," even though a lot of people they would directly compare the scenes
That's
where
a
they
brave
show the
claim.
throne.
That's what I'm
No, the
saying.
reason
Like, that's a
is
brave
because
claim.
exactly what you mentioned, right? The Doctor's the last of his kind, and he spares the bogeyman, or he like helps save the bogeyman because the bogeyman isn't actually bad. The reason the bogeyman is scary is because for its role in the story, it needs to be scary.
Yeah.
It's not actually hostile, right? So it doesn't deserve to die. In End of the World, Cassandra's the last human, and the Doctor just fucking lets her die with a smile on his face. He doesn't give
Yeah.
a shit, right? Now, I'm not saying End of the World is a bad episode. I actually do think End of the World is kind of a flawed episode. It's probably my least favorite of Series 1.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
there is kind of like a lot of also behind the scenes things. And also, I think it's kind of nonsensical. It has its moments, of course. The Britney Spears bit is cinema, is culture right there, right? But and of course, Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper are amazing.
I think
in
that's one
everything.
of the things though that raises like something like End of the World above this for me.
But I love the moments
I
of
think-
Shooty and
no,
Minnie
I
Gibson
do,
when he's like
but-
giving her the directions, and she's like, "No, I'm not going to go." And it's like just
The
he's
issue-
reiterating the direction. Oh, it's great.
The issue I have with that though, I agree with you. I love Gatwa and Gibson's dynamic on screen. I think they got really good chemistry. You know, as good as other Doctors and competitors. My issue with that though is what End of the World does brilliantly. I feel is that it has those quieter moments where you just have to watch the Doctor and Rose kind of figure each other out. Because you've got Rose being like, "You've just sort of brought me here. I don't really know what's going on. Like, oh my god, is my mum dead?" All this sort of stuff, and all of that, which I would say is for me the strongest stuff in End of the World, is kind of sped ran through with the Doctor and Ruby. It's like, yep, you're on a spaceship. You can call your mum. TARDIS key. You know,
I think what is the difference is that End of the World is a lot more edgy, and not in a bad way. Than
that's the thing I like. I like a bit of edge. I like a bit of edge in my
Rose
move.
pulling out Cassandra, which is a brilliant interaction between the two. Very funny, and it's got it does have that kind of edge to it, that kind of realness. With how Rose is just cussing Cassandra out, and Ruby doesn't really have that kind of combativeness to her, which I think is fine because as I say, I like their dynamic. But I can understand why people prefer End of the World. To me, that's always been an episode I've thought was lacking since I first watched it. So I'm not really going to be one to like say, oh, and it's one of the greats.
No, I don't think it's one of the greats. I think it's just on a character level, which is one of the things I value the most. It's doing more for me.
If Series 1 was 8 episodes, End of the World is getting fucking cut. I'm just saying, right? Like,
okay,
that episode, I mean, like, you go Rose, right? Do you bother with End of the World? If you have only 8 episodes.
My hot take is I would prefer End of the World over Unquiet Dead, probably. That's just me.
That's fair. I mean, I prefer Unquiet Dead because I like Mark Gatiss.
Fair. But yeah, no, on Space Babies quickly as well, it's like, I think that they could do more with the political allegory, because I really like the whole thing of like, oh yeah, this planet, they want like a baby producing program, but then don't actually want to pay to like get them anywhere.
What I like about that is because that's like a kind of thing that's put in there. Not only is it not a focal point, it's not even the main allegory of the episode. There's a lot more to the story than just, you know, abortion or whatever.
Yeah.
There's that is a tiny part of it that's part of a wider scheme, and you can view the episode through that lens, but you can also view it through other lens. And I do think there's a lot of meat on the bone in this episode.
I think I just wish there was more of that, because there's only really one scene of that, and the rest of it is very.
Well, that is because it's not like the main message of the episode.
Yeah,
it's just another thing that's thrown in, and it kind of resonates with the themes of the story, but it isn't like the main focal point. You know, usually episodes there's like a main central idea, and then it branches out from that to the point where it actually can be kind of difficult to see the main central idea because it's evolved so much since then. I don't think that is like the main part, like where the idea originated from. If you watch Rusty Davies' interview where he talks about how he came up with the idea of space babies, if you look at much more through that lens, then I think the episode makes a lot more sense, and you can kind of understand what he's saying, what he's going for. And I also think from like a subjective point of view, the baby mouse thing doesn't bother me at all. And I know that's kind of like the moment where it either makes or breaks it, and some people are just going to be like, nope, switch
I
that
think for a
shit
lot
off,
of people,
you know what I
they
mean?
have the same feeling towards the baby mouse as like you do with like Wobbly on the corridor. You know what I mean? Like it's that same
Yeah,
sort of.
definitely.
You know what I mean? I think I'm not too. The thing is, I'm not too bothered about Doctor Who VFX in general. I've kind of accepted that watching this show, sometimes you're going to get stuff that looks a bit dodgy, so that doesn't really even bother me too much. But I think also, I mean, to give this episode props. It does have a scene I really like, which is the scene with the Doctor where he's talking to Poppy, who's the captain of the ship,
Yeah.
and he's like, nobody
Well, that's
grows up
great
wrong. Like, that whole scene is really lovely. Really nice
I do
scene.
think that's lovely. I also love when Shooty Gatwa goes, Bogeyman, he scares all of them.
Yeah, that's good, that's
Made me
good.
laugh
I
every
like
time.
seeing the Doctor scare them, that's funny. But overall, I think, like...
I want to put it in A tier, but you're not going to let that. You're not going to let that slide.
I don't think I wanted to put Church on Ruby Road in C10. I don't think I can put Space Babies in A. Like,
I'm a Space Babies lover. I really do like it.
I mean, if I'm honest with myself, it would be.
I want to put it in C tier then.
Yeah, I feel like I'd have to put it in C.
You'd probably put it a bit lower if I wasn't here.
Probably.
Right? So that balances that out.
Yeah. I feel like because we put Church in B, I think to like,
I think Space Babies is actually quite a far step above.
I actually do prefer it to Church. But the thing is,
I want to move Church down to C.
Yeah, can we do that? You know what? I'm on board with that actually. Whew.
That looks a lot more cleaner as well.
That was tough. That was like negotiations. Right.
Negotiations.
Devil's Cord. Now
I want to put this one in S tier. I want to put this in S tier.
Do you? Okay.
I want to put most of the episodes in S tier.
Let's discuss first. Let's discuss. Because this one, I think, is probably the most Marmite of the series, I think.
Oh, really?
It's safe to say. I think so.
I think Dot and Bubble is the most Marmite.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I guess you could describe a lot of the episodes of that. But I think for this one, I think a lot of people either love this episode or really don't like it. I am, luckily for you, on the camp of people who likes this one, who likes it quite a bit. For one thing, I think Maestro, brilliant. As a villain, like as a concept, as a performance, love it. Still slightly more of a Toymaker fan personally, but she's still
but
good.
that's not quite fair, you know.
Yeah.
One is a world-class actress and the other one's like a Broadway star. Right?
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. Like, it doesn't mean that, Jinx is bad. It's just for me. I think, you know what it is? I think the Toymaker has more quiet moments where they can be a bit more calculated, whereas Maestro's whole character is very, like, I am just mad, and that's fun, but it's different, you know? But anyway, that aside, I think, honestly, and I don't know whether anyone else ever picks up on this connection, I think the Devil's Cord and the Giggle have quite similar vibes. In terms of, like...
it's a spiritual successor.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And I don't even just mean because of, like, you know, obviously the connections to the Giggle, but just tonally it feels very similar to it to me, for the most part.
I love the structure of this episode. I think if you, like, from a writing standpoint, this is the most standard, like, quintessential Doctor Who story. It's got the structure down.
I think that might be Rogue, you know. I think for me that's Rogue. In terms
I
of
feel like
structure.
Rogue is lacking compared to the Devil's Cord. In my opinion, I think the Devil's Cord has got like everything. I think if I
prefer Devil's Cord over Rogue, but I think if you want to talk to like about which one's the more traditional
Rogue
structurally,
feels kind of like a filler episode. The Devil's Cord feels like a real episode. You know what I mean?
Okay, I hear you with that. I do get what you're saying. So I think the theme of music. And the impact it has on the world is really lovely. And I think I love the scene where I can't remember which one of the Beatles it is. I'm not really a man of knowledge when it comes to music, I'm afraid. But when he's like, I'm not good at anything. You know, I'm just going to go home with like a woman of my own. That's all I want. If I can get some money out, some cheap. And as a creative person, you feel that pain. You feel that, you're really talented. Don't stop. You're great. So I really like that. I really like the overall message that this story is going for. The unfortunate thing for me about this one, and why I couldn't join you in putting it in S tier, is for me, there's a couple of little things that just hold this one back from that. However, for me personally, I'll lay my cards on the table right now. I would put it next to the giggle if it were me, which would make it an
Okay, let's just do that. I mean, I'm kind of in the camp where if someone like says, okay, name 5 problems with the Devil's Chord, I'm dead silent. I can't even think of one right now.
I think for me, so for starters, I think it has a similar problem ending wise to what I was talking about with the ball game with the toy maker. I think
this is better. I think this is way better.
Yes and no. I'm going to do one of those really annoying YouTuber things of like, I agree and disagree, because thematically, it's a lot better, I think. And I agree with you there. Like, as a thematic ending, like, using the soul of music to banish away moisture, sure. Yes, but I still think it's just a bit too, I don't know, easy. I know that obviously you could say that like the Doctor and Ruby don't actually succeed in that, which I like. But I don't know, there's just something a bit convenient about the ending that I'm not in love with that. And
this is one of the things where if you knew the Beatles songs, you might be able to appreciate it more because the what do they call it? Not the heavenly chord. It's like the opposite.
Okay.
One. It's one of the Beatles' most famous songs. It's the first chord of one of the Beatles songs. I think it's Imagine. Right. And that's also, they've kind of been building up to that.
I see. See, I didn't know that.
It's been implanted in their heads.
Right,
so they've been.
Well, I thought it was more just like sort of, I guess, the soul of music, because he's like, it sounds like the most heavenly thing on earth when you
Which,
say it.
By the way, that song that he hums, I'm pretty sure is the Doctor Who "Do We?" I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Okay, interesting.
Right? Which I think is very sweet. I thought that was diegetic comment because I love to imagine
really
the
funny.
Doctor can hear the music.
That's really funny.
Makes no sense in universe, but it's just a great headcanon because it explains how the Doctor can tell the tone of the scene, even though, right, like realistically, you shouldn't be able to tell unless you could hear the music, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like in Dot and Bubble, for example, he's instantly suspicious of Lindy when Ricky September isn't with her, which wouldn't make sense unless you imagine, oh, he can hear the music, in which it makes perfect sense because he's hearing this, sketchy ass music, and she's acting slightly weird.
Yeah, that's fun.
I just love that headcanon, and I thought it was very funny. And I really like the visual, actually, because both their costumes are so good in this story. But the way, like, the wrapping things, they, like, fly up into the sky, and it, like, fits with the costume and all of that. It's just a brilliant visual. You can, like, see the concept art, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I think it was so brought to life so well. And I really do love that scene at the start where they get changed.
Yes, I was just about to say, something about this episode I love is how fun it is, and specifically how much fun the Doctor and Ruby are having. One of the things I personally felt like I was missing from the previous era, and you might, disagree, is our resident Chibnall guy.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of the time I didn't really get what the companions were enjoying about travelling with the Doctor. Because a lot of the time it felt so much like it was down to business for me that I was like, this doesn't seem like that much fun. But like immediately with Devil's Chord, where they're like, I want to go see the Beatles, and he's like, great idea. And then they like hit the music on and they're all excited to go get you. I was like, I get it, Just that little scene.
The pose and everything.
Yeah, it's like that little scene, I get why this would be fun,
I love how they transition into the I have a dog, he's no friend. Their faces fall.
Yeah, it's
fun.
So
funny. Oh
the thing is, I love like the first 20 or so minutes of this episode pretty much unconditionally. Like I think
when does it get bad for you? Because I'm just imagining it, and it's like
bad necessarily.
Good scene after good
I think
scene
bad is harsh. I think there's just a couple of little things, where it's sort of like when they go to destroyed London. And I do like that bit, but I don't like. I know everyone brings it up, but I'm not. The 6-month time jump thing. I know he's explained it as being like, oh, it's explaining how improvements it was. Sarah Jane wasn't actually for the 80s. Like, bro, I don't care. For me,
I can't believe Russell T Davies had the gall to be like, oh, was it? I put that in because only audiences were picked up and fans wouldn't care or whatever. It's like that's complete opposite. Only fans will care. The audience won't notice.
He said only fans would think 6 months has passed. Like, what else are you supposed to take from that as like an audience member?
I think that's a cover for the fact they switched the order of episodes.
I think that could well be it. But like the thing is, for me, it's one of those things that, you know, it isn't a huge issue with this episode particularly, but it does create an issue with the rest of the series in that I feel that as much as I enjoy the chemistry of Gatwa and Gibson on screen, and like I believe it, and I buy that they're friends, I don't feel like it develops enough, and I also feel like one of the things that is missing from this run is some skepticism from Ruby's end of the Doctor as a person. Obviously, I'm not saying that they need to be at each other's throats the whole time. I don't want that. But equally, I'm sort of like, because you have that like line in this episode where it's like, you never hide. And it's like, bro, we have seen one off-Earth adventure with you, and he spends the majority of that hiding. Like, where did that come from? Do you know what I'm saying?
There was a tension driven to the fact is like, I never run, you know, in Space Babies, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
And I do love that bit where he's like covering her eyes and they realize.
Yeah, I do like that, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I buy their chemistry. I just wish there was more time given to like seeing it evolve. I feel like it's so instantaneous that I think this feels like you're missing a step.
In the way we watch Doctor Who, because I don't watch Doctor Who I don't binge it. I watch it episode by.
So do I. But I am obviously, because we're like reviewing the whole thing in totality.
Oh yeah.
I'm sort of looking at it with hindsight as well to a degree.
I mean, I think of it more in the episodic thing, and if I do want to engage my fan brain fully, I can put together the dots. What do they say? They said July of 2024, and the only other episode that aired in July was Rogue, apart from the finale. Obviously, the finale were meant to air in July.
Yeah.
Right? And there's 1 week. And also, you know, there was the Unleashed thing where they said next week or whatever, implying that this wasn't meant to be a simultaneous 2-episode release. Like, if I really want to engage my fan brain, I can just brush it aside like that of, oh, well, this episode actually takes place after Rogue. So, you know, it doesn't disrupt any timeline.
I think the other thing about this episode for me, and like the thing is, overall, it's still an 8. I still really enjoy this episode. I don't want to get it twisted as I hate the Devil's Cook, because I don't. I have a lot of fun with it, and it's a very rewatchable episode for me. Like, it's a ton of fun. And I do like the musical sequence at the end, which I know is a controversial thing.
I like it too, and it shadows the whole season.
And I actually don't mind the fourth wall breaking in this episode, because I think with episodes like this, you can get away with it. And I also don't think everything needs an in-universe explanation all the time. I think for me as well, I don't mind it so much when the gods do it in like their episodes, because like it's kind of established that they are beyond the fourth wall to a degree. Like, obviously the toy maker, you know, seems to have some awareness of like the wider universe and stuff like that. And I think so. I think Maestro doing it for me comes across as completely natural, completely fine. I
don't know if you remember when it was first announced that this would be a musical episode, but I remember people had a completely different connotation when they heard that, right? Because I imagine most people thought it would be like a Joker 2 type thing. You know
I haven't seen
where it's
it
like
yet.
An actual musical. I haven't seen it either, but I've heard a few things.
I have,
But what I mean more so is that like it's an actual musical, and it's not an episode that has a musical number in it. You know, musicals, usually the musical numbers are like integral to the plot, and they like move the plot forward, and they show like the emotions of the characters and all of that, and they aren't just like a kind of afterthought. Not that that's really an afterthought, but
I get what you're saying.
It's an epilogue of the episode.
Yeah,
right. That's the musical scene. Whereas in an actual musical, they would be singing songs like basically at each set piece, right?
Yeah.
And so I can understand how maybe some people were left disappointed if they were expecting Beatles songs, or if they're expecting a musical episode.
That's the other thing that slightly does disappoint me about this. Even though I'm not a big music guy, I've always loved celebrity historical. Like, I love Vince and the Doctor. Like, it's so good. And I do feel that, even though there's that lovely scene towards the beginning with the Beatles talking about their music and stuff, I do wish they had a bit more to do. I think that was, that's one of my slight...
Yeah, they're not the main focus. And the actors who play them just look nothing
They don't look like
nothing
Beatles. No, they don't. Yeah, not remotely. It's Beatles from Wish. It is the beetle from Wish, but like,
It's like that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory thing. Do you remember?
oh, the Wonka experience. Yeah. It's
I still think it's great. Though.
yeah. I mean, here's the thing with Devil's Call. I really enjoy it, but it is like, I think it is in this. You know what you were saying about the giggle, where it's like there's just a few things about it. I think this has that for me to a degree. You know, where it's like it's good, and I think for most of it, I'm really on board. I think there's just some slight things. Like there was something else I was going to mention as well that's gone out of my head now. But
Can I just say, looking at the list right now, if this was my list, right, I can see it. Every single one would be raised up a tier.
Damn. Okay. I feel like we balance each other out though, because I think for me,
that's true. This is like a more like generally accepted tier list.
I think for me, Space Babies and Church would be moved down. Only, so I want to say, with the letters, I probably should clarify, this is only within the context of its, like, of this era specifically.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, an E, you know, like a C in this era is not equivalent to me as a C in, like, another era, you know? It's just...
Which is different to, like, my tier lists, where I put, like, Wild Blue Yonder in B tier, right? I still think it's an S tier when you compare it to, like, this, but if you compare it to Genesis of the Daleks, it's a B tier episode for me, right?
Sure.
That's why I make two different types of videos, where I make one where it's all of classic Doctor Who included as well, and one where it's just modern Who, right? Because you can, there's obviously, you know, just an inherent and intuitive difference there in quality when you're comparing it to something when you're just looking at it on its own.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say as well, we get the Susan mention in this episode.
We do.
I quite like.
I like it. I like that thing.
I can get why some people would say it's a bit like, it does feel a bit random, but also I quite like the idea that the Doctor is willing to share that stuff, because, and I think another thing, obviously I'm mentioning the previous era again, but it's important for me to mention it in relation to why I like this era more, because it sort of explains it for me, I guess. But like, I think, because obviously the 13th Doctor's whole thing was that like, no one gets to know anything. No one gets to know nothing.
Which I actually kind of like, but I understand why people don't.
I think I liked it initially. I think for me, when it got to like series 3 and like she still hasn't told Yaz anything about the Seventh Child, I'm like, come on, man. Like, give her something, bless her.
She never did.
Especially like, she never does. And like, even Ryan gets to find out. But not Yaz. Like, anyway. So that aside, it did feel quite refreshing to have a Doctor that was just willing to talk about something as personal as Susan.
And also you can tell that he's kind of masking sadness behind smiles.
Right? And
which I thought was a great addition to Gail's character. A lot of people miss this, is that he's smiling a lot even when like he kind of shouldn't be, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Right, like obviously Rogue is the big example everyone points to, where he like just gets like, well, gotta keep moving, but it's obvious even though he's smiling, there's more to it than there. He also smiles when he's being like threatened by villains, you know what I mean?
Yeah, although
like, he's got that kind of calm air of confidence.
This is the one,
episode where he does not do that. It's true.
I will say with this episode specifically, one of the big criticisms you see of Gatwa is that he cries too much. That's one of the main, you know, sort of things lobbied at this Doctor. And the thing is, I think in most instances of him doing it, it's justified. It makes perfect sense, like, I think.
I think the only one is Empire of Death, but we'll get there when we get there.
But he does do it a bit in Devil's Call when he's like confronting the Maestro. Not like to the same degree, but like the eyes get a bit watery, you know? Yeah. I'm sort of like, I get that she's a god and all that, but also like, I want the Doctor to be a bit stronger in those scenes.
I think the Doctor is a telepathic being, and that he can sense sadness. And similarly, in the Church on Ruby Road, the reason he starts crying is because he can feel the sadness deep within Carla and Cherry. Sure. And similarly, in the Devil's Cord, the reason he's partly crying is because he can sense the kind of like terror and destruction and sadness of the world around him.
I like that. I like that.
That's a headcanon. But it kind of like explains that for me. Sure. I understand, because before, you probably see these posts where it's like, the Doctors cried before, but it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out, that they didn't cry as much.
Yeah, they didn't cry as much. And also, I think villains for me is like, if he's like, crying on his own, or like, sad on his own, or in like a high stress, sure, but you can't let a villain see that you're vulnerable. You've got to try and be like, nah. I'm going to take you down. I think I'd want a bit more of that, because I think, I think most of the time he is like that. Like, I love the scene towards the end where he's like smiling, playing the piano, and I kind of
That was
I don't
brilliant.
I don't need him smiling all the time either. But I guess I just wanted a bit more
When he was
defiance.
talking to the maestro and he was saying that I've loved so much and all of
Yeah,
that.
that's
I
great.
mean, the thing is, for me, is that in principle, I agree with you in that before this series, if someone said, should the Doctor be crying every episode, I'd say, probably not. But in practice, it doesn't actually bother me that much.
No,
So I
I think
can't really
most
like kind of
in
agree or disagree on that front. It just kind of is what
the
it
thing
is
is, in
for me.
most instances, I think it's fairly reasonable. Like Boom, for example, that's a very stressful situation. Dot and Bubble, he's
And
just
I think it works really well. I actually think it's really
yeah.
powerful.
In Dot and Bubble, you know, he's just being racially like abused. Rogue, he's
And
just
it's really
lost
powerful.
someone he loves. And then in the finale, you know, the universe. I think in most cases, those are
The
fair
one I
things to
will
cry about. I
Why
think,
did he cry over Sutek? No,
yeah,
that one
no.
does not make sense. That's the whole series where I'm like, you're crying. Sutek, he killed like trillions of people. He's killed the most people. He's got the highest death count in the whole of Doctor Who. He killed the whole universe.
But
And you're crying
that's
over killing
why
him?
that's
What are you
why
doing?
for me, like him
Oh
crying
my
with
god,
Maestro, I'm like, do not, no, not with Maestro. You know, just the one. That's the one time where I wish they hadn't done it. I think for the rest of the series, I don't mind it as much. I think that's the one. So I wanted to bring it up here because it's one of those inevitable things that come up
yeah.
in conversations throughout the series. But most of the other times, I think it's
Definitely.
pretty fair. But I do think it is the regularity of it that does cause some people to roll their eyes, which I do understand.
And that's the 8 episode problem rearing its
That
head
is
yet
the eight
again.
episode problem. Yeah, that's very true. I'm trying to think of anything else I wanted to bring up about this episode. My dog Fred, that scene is hilarious. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Brilliant.
I think I'm happy with that. Overall, a good, fun
Yep.
episode, and I much prefer it to Space Babies personally.
Yep.
It felt like
I
a
do
step
get
up.
why they really. I get why they dropped two at the same time. I do.
Yeah, I think if I was left to stew on Space Baby, well, to be fair, I already kind of was left to stew on Space Babies for a week because of my sort of seeing it
You watched it
early.
early.
So that's the thing. Like for me, on the night it came out, I watched Devil's Called first because I'd seen Space Babies already. So that was interesting.
Lucky bastard.
But yeah, no. I think one of the things that I noticed about season 1, series 14, what we're going to call it, is week to week. I actually thought, this is like really strong week to week, and I think this is the start.
I felt that too.
This is the start of that point. And with that, let's do
Let's move on to
Boom.
Boom.
I think Boom is an S. I'm going to lay that down right now. S for Stephen Moffat, baby. He's back.
My goat, he's back. He was not
back.
calling anyone when he said he wasn't in it, especially when Rusty Davies said in the commentary, it's like, oh yeah, Stephen Moffat's involved.
Yeah,
Whoops.
I also love the little. Have you seen the video of him like being like, "Oh, it's like boom." If I talk about Doctor Who, it goes boom everywhere. It will not bring joy to the world if I tell people I'm not in it. And that's his like hidden coded way of being like.
He is bit.
Yeah,
what a cheeky bugger.
I love him so much.
Stephen Moffat,
But
man.
Boom,
He's so great.
Boom is just a classic Moffat. And,
this is like a celebration of everything he's done for the show. You know what I mean?
And it's like, it's the sort of thing of like, oh, I miss this. Especially as someone who's very much like, my nostalgia is honestly more with Smith than with Tennant. I was like, oh, this feels like, it felt like, putting on a warm jumper in the winter. It felt like coming home in a weird way. I also, weirdly, felt very much like a Capaldi episode as well.
I think someone pointed out in my comment section that you could imagine the dialogue being switched to Peter Capaldi saying it, and
Clara for Ruby as well. Honestly, I think.
That's true. Didn't Rusty Davies leave a note to Stephen Moffat, write her like Clara Amy? Right? Didn't he say that?
Yeah, probably.
He showed one of the normal ones, Rose, Clara, and Amy. That's what the writing note was for Ruby, which was. It's very interesting, and that's probably accurate. And also, when we heard that, we probably should have realised that she didn't have special parents. But
true.
I think this episode, what really works in its favour, is just how strongly paced it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that it really does have that kind of nail-biting intensity, but you never really. Ironically, stay in one place at the same time. We're staying in one location, but there's new people coming in all the time. And the big problem that you could encounter with an episode like this is that it gets boring.
Sure.
Right? And I would say, and I think you'd agree, that it doesn't get boring.
No,
and
not
even
at
on
all.
rewatch, it doesn't get boring.
One of the
which
things
is
I
the
think
biggest success of the episode.
This episode might be one of the best at doing, at least in New Who, is tension. Every movement, every moment, every line feels laced in tension.
And
like
the editing is so good.
At any moment, it feels like something could go wrong, and it does at multiple points in the story. Just that scene where the kid is looking for a dad, and the hologram of him activates, and they're like, no, the bomb is gonna blow up.
Oh yeah.
Like it's really good, and it's like it's almost a stressful watch, but I mean that in a good way, because that's how you're supposed to feel watching it. You're supposed to feel like, oh, and
Ncuti Gatwa's performance is so good when he's like, he's got his Zen on, he's singing to himself, but then he recites that poem to himself, and then he's talking to Mundy Flynn. All of that is just
really like
God
that.
There.
I really like the setting of this as well. I think it's a really it's one of those worlds that just the planet name, that's a good one. I can't actually remember.
Astarius 6.
Yeah, I think I know that
was it the fake guys are called the Castarians?
Yeah. So Castarion 3, I think, isn't it?
Castarion 3.
Yeah, that's the one. That sounds about right.
Probably a reference. Everything in this episode is a reference to something. Which
I even love that he says, "Oh, I've got to go the long way. You've got to go the long way around to try and get to it." I even stuff like that. I was like, I see you.
What I love about it is it's so many references that we as fans get, but it doesn't diminish it at all if you're like a newcomer, which is the best way to do it. And it's always a big balancing act when you want to appease fans, but you also need to make it primarily for new audiences first.
Yeah.
And I think this episode works for both, which is why it's so good.
I agree completely. I think Gatwa, like you said, really good performance. I think this, for me, is probably the best 15th Doctor. Oh no, I was going to say the best 15th Doctor showcase we have so far, but also probably one of the best. Oh, actually no, because I think 73 yards might be. Rude.
Oh yeah, 73 yards.
But I think for me, because I think it's interesting because this one, like, it pushes him to his complete limit. Like, his companion dies and he can't even move. You know,
the next time trailer for this episode was so good. By the way, can I just say?
Yeah.
Damn.
But like,
I don't know if you remember, I was so excited.
Yeah, it was good. But he has to rely on everyone else, which again is something the Doctor's not used to having to do. The Doctor's used to walking into a situation, immediately taking control, doing this, and this. He can't do that here. And I think that's it's like what I was saying earlier about like the Doctor not being able to think in well beyond that. I love stories that take fundamental things that the Doctor takes for granted away. Because I think that's like really interesting in terms of challenging the character. And I think this does that. And I also think, just in terms of like the morality of the character, like, oh, Stephen just gets it, bro. Like, why are there flashing lights on a bomb? Capitalism. It looks good in a showroom.
And especially the ending sequence, which I don't know if you remember this, but because people were so going out of their way to hate on the show, people were accusing this episode of like anti-Christian hate or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
But like that last scene, it just spells it out so clearly that you've got to be malicious if you're taking it the wrong way. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because he very much supports it by the end. You know, he's like...
Well, it's like a really layered, detailed, like, solution that doesn't showcase, like, hate. It's all about, like, the positives of religion. As someone who's not necessarily religious but deeply respects all religions.
Yeah,
right?
same. I'm the same.
That's the way it is, because religion is a wonderful thing. It can be a wonderful thing. It can also be a terrible thing. But the thing is that you can't just kind of portray it as one or the other, because there are billions of people who are attached to these religions.
Yeah, and you also
to say it's all good or all bad is ridiculous.
You can't use your faith as an excuse. It shouldn't be used as an excuse to just do whatever. You know,
but that doesn't also mean that faith is an inherently bad thing.
No, not at all. No,
and that's why I love this episode, because it isn't the.
It's quite nuanced about it. It really is quite.
It's brilliant.
Yeah,
it is, and the Doctor's morality is so good. Of course, they throw in the reference at the end as well to fish fingers and custard.
Oh, I love that. Yep, great. And I think one of the criticisms I've seen of this episode is that the whole like love saves the day thing with the hologram again.
Oh no, man! Love saving the day is brilliant.
I think I got a bit sick of it towards the end of the Moffat era, but because we haven't had that in quite a while, I quite liked it. It was like, oh, this just feels...
To be fair, a lot of Moffat resolutions are kind of like exactly the same.
I think if every episode started ending like that... Yeah, I think if every episode started ending like that, I'd start to be a bit like, okay, Stephen, calm down. There's more than one way to end a story. But as it is, I was like, no, I think this is quite nice for this story specifically. And I quite like that, again, you get that sort of hammering in of the Doctor being a dad. I think that's quite good.
Brilliant.
I also think just Ruby dying as well is like...
I was
so shocked when that happened.
It was so well... when you're writing these things, it's like moving a bunch of puzzle pieces together, and moving the puzzle pieces to get to that situation where that shock value moment happened is like masterful. It's so intense. I mean, okay, I will never act like this is a secret, right? But I am a massive Chibnall era fan, Jodie Whittaker fan. I love it. That being said, wouldn't it have been amazing if there was an episode like this with Jodie Whittaker?
This is what I'm
Wouldn't
saying.
that have been amazing? I mean, just one where she is put on like the real back foot in a similar way to this. And I mean, technically there are episodes like Once Upon a Time where that happens, but they're so different to what I'm talking about here. If this episode with Jodie Whittaker, and maybe it would even make the fact that there are multiple companions, right? Like, make that better.
It would also maybe make it more stressful, to be fair, if you had more variables as well. In a sense. I think
because the big problem with this episode when you're writing it, and the reason why it needed to be written so much, is because a big problem with the 45-minute format of Doctor Who is that you need to have simultaneously a lot to fill up 45 minutes, but you can't go too much because then you've overstuffed your episode.
Yeah, which happens a lot, I think.
He perfectly balances just the right amount of set pieces and stuff happening, so it feels like a full story by the end. But I can imagine that he either resolved it too quickly or he left it unresolved for too long, and that just makes it all fall down. But it's just perfectly handled.
I would say this story is the best utilization of the 45-minute format in this era so far. Maybe with Wobbly on it as well, to a degree as well. But like, if we're talking Gatwick specific, I think Boom is like, it's just, again, it's so tight, because I think as much as I love... Well, I guess Dot and Bubble as well.
I think the Devil's Cord is the best application of it, actually.
Do you think so?
I think that gets the structure down perfect.
See, I think that one suffers a little bit from what you were saying with the overstuffing personally. Not too much, but a little bit for me. Whereas I think Boom is like paced really well. I think Dot and Bubble is paced really well.
The problem with the 45-minute format for me is more so that a bunch of stories kind of just mesh together and don't feel like fully formed stories, and they just feel like kind of like ideas that are padding out the series. So when I think of 45-minute formats, I think of like the Lazarus Experiment, which is like that episode is kind of just, it's there because we need something in the series, and it doesn't feel like a full real episode of the show. There's like ideas there and memorable moments you remember, but it's not like a real episode.
Yeah, I hear you. Which this doesn't feel like. This feels like a complete package.
Yeah, like this is like a real story. To be fair, right, if I'm being honest, I think every episode in this series would be better if it was 4 20-minute parts. It had more. Well, the thing is that when people spring up, if it was an hour, it'd be fixed. Every episode of Flux was an hour, right? It doesn't fix the problem. Maybe if you make them 90 minutes and you restructure the whole thing, like to be like a Sherlock episode, maybe. But the problem is that Doctor Who inherently, I feel like, is meant for the 20-minute format, and you can restructure all these episodes easily because they all have like a cliffhanger-esque moment around 20 minutes in. I mean, the Maestro comes out at exactly 20 minutes in to the story. That's when they come out of the piano, right? In Boom, the 20-minute moment is when Mundi Flynn shines her light on the Doctor. In the 20-minute moment in Space Babies is when the kid goes down into the basement, right? Like all of these, with enough reconfiguring, could become cliffhangers, and it can also add depth to the story, just like the way these will strike. I'm going to make a full video about why the 20-minute format is so superior, especially in the new age with faster pacing. Which the thing which a lot of people hold against classic Doctor Who is its slow pacing, but that isn't a problem with the 20-minute format. That's just how TV was at the time.
I think I might need a bit more convincing, but I can respect.
Don't worry, I'll make a full video.
Respect it.
That will understand everything.
I think honestly, I would. I am team 1 hour personally. For me, for now. Maybe you'll change my mind. For me, I am mostly team 1 hour. But that aside, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention about this episode off the top of my head. I think the romance is quite well done as well. Romance
Yeah.
subplots in Doctor Who can be a bit hit or miss for me. Sometimes I'm like, I really don't care, to be honest. And then other times I'm like, oh, this is quite nice. And this is one of the areas where I'm like, this is quite nice. And the moment where she's talking to him, only to look up and realise it's his dead hologram,
Yeah.
really good. I think Ruby gets a solid showing in this one as well. She's a bit more defiant in this one, which I like, and I feel like that's sort of missing in some of the rest of the series, like I was saying. I think it was just really, really good, and I think it really holds up, and I think it's a really tense, well-crafted 45 minutes of television with some interesting themes. My guy, Stephen Moffat, is back. Looking forward to Christmas, and if it's on a similar level...
I really do. He is so funny. Like,
if it's on a similar
just all
level...
of that, so witty, and it's so dark as well. I love it. Let's move on to 73.
Yeah, let's do 73 odds. This one is a funky little guy, isn't he? He's a fun one.
You might disagree. I'd put this in S tier. I'll put this in S plus tier. I'll put this in Z tier.
So I thought you said Z.
My top 10 modern episodes of Doctor Who tier. I love it.
So here's the interesting thing. I want to lay the groundwork for this first. I feel like whenever I start one of these, I tell a story to kind of justify where my head's at with it.
You got to do that because that's where we're all coming from. You know what
exactly, I mean? Yeah. But when I first watched this one, obviously it was the midnight. Obviously, it dropped at midnight on BBC iPlayer and whatever, and I watched it, and I thought it was good, but I was overall kind of just confused by it, and I don't think that's because of the episode so much as it is. It's not the sort of thing you want to watch at midnight when your brain's already half shut off. And I was sort of confused by it initially. Watching it, and I think, because there's a clip of me on another podcast type thing, where I'm reviewing it with someone, and I give it a 7 overall. So not a bad score, but
I'm a 7?
But hang on, give me a second to hear me out. So, I watched it the first time, and I was like, it's good, but... I don't know, there's some things that I wish was explained or that they did more with. And I watched it again, sort of a few days after, and it just clicked more the second time around. I think a part of that's the midnight thing, but also I think it's coming to realise that the point is that a lot of it isn't explained. The point of it is that you're supposed to go out and sort of go what? And sort of draw a lot of your own conclusions and sort of think about the themes and what it's trying to say. And I think in that sense, it succeeds. And it is one of the most creative and unique episodes we've had in a very long time. And I think as a companion showpiece, it's really strong as well. I think this is by far Ruby Sunday's best episode. And it's why, for me, she's still solid, even though I wish there was more to her, is because this episode does such a great job of delving into who this character is, what drives her, but also what she fears. That scene where she goes home and they've changed the locks after and the mum's like, you're not really my daughter though, are you? And she's just left out there alone. Heartbreaking stuff, and you can totally understand, how that would break her. And it's so good, and the woman is one of those things that's just one of those brilliant sort of fantasy, horror, sci-fi concepts that I think is just perfectly executed. The direction of the scene where I love the bit where she's on the train and she's looking out the train window, and every sort of time the train goes faster, each time she just moves along with the train. But also when she's trying to explain to Kate Stewart, I'm worried about going on a plane because if she dies then maybe I die. There's so many
it's a really good clue as well, and it's also just really effective. Have you ever watched The Shining, the film, the Stanley Kubrick film?
Not in a long time. I have, but it's been a long time.
There's a lot of similarities, I feel, with the Shining and 73 Yards, and a lot of people aren't going to get what I mean, so I'm going to go in further, in that The Shining is a story that is all atmosphere. It's basically all atmosphere. You can kind of summarize the story, the whole story, very simply, right? They arrive, everyone else goes, they stay for a few months, then Jack starts seeing hallucinations, then he goes insane, and then he chases them through the maze and he freezes and they escape. And that's the whole story, right?
Yeah.
but it's all atmosphere and it's all soundtrack and shots and the performance of mostly silence, right? Mostly just people looking and staring with the music playing,
Yeah.
and nothing is explained at all. So, like, what's in room 237? There's a woman in it, but is that the reason why the guy at the start was so scared of room 237? Did Danny even go into room 237? Did Jack actually, hit Danny, or was it the ghost in room 237 who hit Danny? And then there's also a few things that don't quite add up at the very start before everyone leaves. The guy who's interviewing Jack is like, there was a guy who used to work here and he went crazy and he killed his two he killed his two daughters. One of them was 10 years old, one of them was 7 years old, right? Now, I might be getting the ages wrong. It might be 9 and 7, but whatever. The point is that later we see two twin girls, right? You probably remember that image, right? Where they're holding hands, right? But they're twins, right?
Sure.
So they can't be the same girls that they were talking about before. And also the guy, I forget his name. It was like Dentley or something, who was the previous caretaker. Jack meets him as a ghost. He's a butler and he's not a caretaker and he's never been the caretaker. And he says, I've always been here and you've always been the caretaker. And then at the very end, there's the picture which shows that Jack has been there since 1927. And it's like, none of this stuff makes sense when you first watch it. And even when you've thought about it a lot, right? Like, I probably couldn't give an offhand response to how Jack is able to be in that picture at the end, but you know that so much thought went into it. You know that none of this stuff was put there randomly, right? And so you figure it out for yourself and you start getting these readings of the ancient burial grounds, of the blood in the elevator, of the maybe connections to Auschwitz. And all of these readings have evidence, but none of them have real hard evidence. And you kind of have to just figure it out for yourself. And it's the same with 73 Yards in that there's a common consensus of, the woman represents either her fear or her fear of abandonment or her grief. Or
that's
trauma
probably
or
my
anything.
favorite. That's probably my favorite theory, is that
And
it represents
that's
her
probably
fear
the
of
one that I
abandonment.
connect
Yeah.
with as well.
Yeah.
But it could be anything. It could be
could
an
be.
alien. It could be a fairy. It could be like a watcher, like from Doctor Who. And all of that is true. But the magic or the mystery and why it works so well is because you can put anything in there and you can put all those pieces together for yourself. And I do think that a lot of the criticisms come from people who don't quite get it. Like, I see this a lot. It's like, it has time travel in and it's not explained. It's like, okay, well, that you've missed the point so far that there's no point.
Wait, what do they mean by
like,
time travel? Just like
because like Ruby goes back to the start of the end, even though it is implied that the old woman actually isn't Ruby, because they're two separate actresses. It would have been very easy for the actor who played the woman who's had her face blurred the whole time to play the old Ruby, but they don't, right? And there is an implication that the old woman is Ruby. There's also an implication that it isn't Ruby and that there's no time travel and it's not even a time loop. It's just like a one go around.
Yeah.
And there's all of these different readings in it. And I just think it's so special. And just before I keep rambling on, I've got to get this out. When people compare this episode to Turn Left or Midnight, I think they're missing the real comparison this episode, which is to Heaven Sent. I think you can compare this episode to Heaven Sent so much easier than to those ones, because while they share, I guess, a few similarities, Turn Left has the companion only and it's set in modern day Earth and there's bad political stuff happening. But outside of that, right, it's very different and its role in the series is very different. Whereas 73 Yards and Heaven Sent are so similar to the point where I actually think Russ Davies watched Heaven Sent and was like, I'm going to make my own version of that.
Sure.
Because,
yeah, I can see that.
I mean, there's so much there that's like completely similar. Of course, it's the Doctor's alone in Heaven Sent, Ruby's alone in 73 Yards. There's something following him wherever he goes in Heaven Sent and 73 Yards. There's a loop at the end, but it's implied that the Doctor either doesn't remember most of it or maybe remembers some of it, and it's all left up to interpretation, right? The episode takes far longer than you thought it would when you first boot it up. When you first boot up Heaven Sent, you're thinking, he's going to be in this castle for a bit.
Noticeably, it doesn't have a title sequence either, 73 Yards. They just go straight in, which I always
go straight in, right? And with Ruby, it follows her through her whole life up until the very end. And a lot of the themes, of trauma and grief are all there in both of them. And the Doctor and Ruby both escape these prisons or punishments or whatever in similar ways. So I do think that those stories are very, very similar in many ways. And when people kind of use the arguments of, oh, well, maybe Ruby doesn't really remember it, so what was the point? It's like, well, you can say that about Heaven Sent
I don't agree with that personally. I think that's...
And just because an episode doesn't have like consequences going forward, does that mean that it's bad?
It's also kind of implied though, like even though she doesn't fully remember it, like the experience at least subconsciously does stay with her. Yeah. And
which is similarly what happened in Heaven Sent, where we don't know if the Doctor remembers the full thing or if he just remembers one go around. What were you going to say? Sorry.
So I was just going to say I think that's a really I think you've really given a really fascinating reading of it. So I don't want to interrupt you at all there because I thought you were giving some really good points.
I was on fire.
You were. And I pretty much agree with all of what you were saying. I think it's one of those episodes I feel right that those episodes that aren't appreciated at their time. And then go on to be the classics.
Oh yeah.
That's
this one. I
do think
in 10 years people are going to call this an all-timer. I'm just saying.
I think because obviously I'm very much in agreement with a lot of what you're saying. I think my major criticism of this one, because obviously I want to be nice and fair, because there's criticisms to be made of every episode of Doctor Who, but for me, I do wish more was done with the political aspect of the story. Because I'm sure you've watched Years and Years. I absolutely love Years and Years. Yeah. It's one of my favourite Russell T Davies projects, sans Doctor Who and Torchwood, obviously, and all the rest of it. But the political allegory of Albion and Jack,
Roger Ap
William, or Mad Jack, as he calls himself. Yeah, I think the whole thing of I just want to nuke everyone, a little bit simplistic for me. I
can't believe people in my comment section were saying that they agreed with him.
What the hell? Yeah, that's crazy.
That's crazy. Some people want to hate this series so bad, man. Yeah, you know what I mean?
For example, I really like the sort of implied stuff that's going on with him and that assistant. Obviously they can't say it out loud, but the stuff where it's
I do.
You know what I'm on about, right? When they're having this... Yeah, he's a terrible, terrible person. But they don't say it out loud. Stuff like that, I think Russell just excels at. And I'm like, oh, this is just such good, world building and character building.
I don't think this episode is trying to be Years and Years.
No,
I know
I
it
agree.
was kind of marketed as that.
I do agree.
But that isn't really the thing. So I don't think I can say, oh, well, it's not Years and Years or turn.
No, I'm not saying I wanted it to be Years and Years necessarily. But I'm just saying, as a political allegory, I just wish his motivations were a bit more fleshed out than let's nuke everyone. Because I quite like one of the lines he says.
But at the same time, you sometimes see people and they really do be just saying that.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That, especially these days. To be fair, I do like the line he has about Welsh people know what it's like to be oppressed. Because I am a Welsh guy. And it kind of gets forgotten that, the UK, and obviously I want to turn this into, a massive, sort of statement. But it's not really. I was just going to tell you that too. It's not really an equal union in the traditional sense. Historically, it's very much England took everyone over. So I think there's something narratively interesting there in a Welsh or a Scottish villain wanting to do the reverse kind of thing.
I wonder how you would feel about this because I know you do live in Wales and all of that.
Yeah.
They portray Welsh people as pretty terrible in this episode.
See, this
because
is the
villagers are all villains and all horrible.
I don't think they are, though. That's
and
my
Roger
take.
William is very clearly playing on that history for his own gain. He obviously doesn't give a shit. He's clearly the reason those two scenes are there is to show that they resent Ruby for being English, even though in the context of that scene she's done absolutely nothing wrong. She's just lost, right? Which is. I've always read it as Russell Davies criticising that part of Welsh culture, which obviously
I agree when it comes to Roger. I agree when it comes to Roger. I disagree when it comes to the townsfolk in the beginning.
I think they are cartoonishly mean.
I don't think they are. Because I think... Okay, I'm trying to put it in their perspective, right? Imagine you're in 2024 and some girl arrives and thinks that you don't have modern technology. You'd probably be a bit
But she didn't say that though. That's why.
I know,
because
but
it was. I do think that's what I understand exactly what you're saying, and I can empathize to a point. I do think it's intentionally critical from his perspective. I think he's being intentionally critical. I
Could
think he
be.
sets that up so that when Roger Ap Gwilliam says it later, you see, oh, well, that's how he got in power. He was
Sure.
playing on that fear that those people have. And it's kind of showing how all societies are kind of susceptible to a nationalistic figure coming in and
Certainly.
saying,
Yeah. I mean,
"Oh,
that's
we're
yeah.
under attack," right? That's how I viewed it, and I imagine. Obviously, I don't know him in real life, but I imagine Rusty Davies has met people just around and about in a similar way I've met English people who are absolutely fucking insufferable, because of course you will, because
Yeah.
there's groups of every type of person who are insufferable and are worthy of criticism. And I can imagine that that's what he's criticizing, because that's just how I view it, because
Perhaps
there's no real other way to. I mean,
it could
you
be
say
that
you
I'm
understand how it is.
broadly.
They were so mean. They were
It
so mean to her.
it could be though that I'm broadly more sympathetic because the thing is, not specifically to Ruby, but the way they talk to each other is so relatable to people I know in everyday life. Do you know what I mean? And
Oh
I
no,
know,
I 1000% get it. That's why I think it's so good, because it's
yeah,
so real,
but
right?
I think
Like these aren't bad people. They're not bad people,
no,
but they are mean to Ruby.
I think
Like, and she does not deserve it, and that's kind of the
I
point.
think I certainly agree with you. They're very mean towards the end, but they kind of blame her for the woman being there. I think I agree with you there because like she's very clearly terrified of it. But I
She
think,
comes in and she's like almost on the verge of tears, and she's got no idea what's going on,
but
and she says that the guy she was with left her, and there's some creepy people following her, and they don't give a shit, and they
in
play
full
like the
fairness,
meanest prank,
though,
and they're so rude, and like even the guy who are around, like the two people in the pub who are like around her age are still taking the piss
in
out of
full
her.
fairness, though, British pubs, British
Oh
people
yeah,
are,
terrible, man.
you
They're
know,
terrible.
so like,
Oh no, I'm not trying to turn it into that. Of course
yeah,
not.
yeah,
I'm saying from Ross Davies' perspective,
yeah,
I
sure,
think it is a critique of that,
it
and
could
that's
well
why I
be.
think Roger
That's
Ap
interesting.
Gwilliam is son of Wales, and I think it's very intentional that Roger Ap Gwilliam isn't like a Boris Johnson type or a Rishi Sunak type, would have been like a
The
very
easy way
easy
to do it, yeah,
like goal to score. I do think it's a real kind of, how do I say it? I do think it's like a real kind of cutting thing in a way where it's challenging for him to write in a way where it makes sense why he would say this is the thing he's most proud of
sure,
ever writing, because there's so many details and nuances. The people in the pub aren't bad people,
no,
right? But the way they act to Ruby is mean in a
sure,
way that makes sense, and it shows how Roger Ap Gwilliam gets into power, and it also doesn't show that Roger Ap Gwilliam got into power by putting down English people. Say I'm only going to go to Wales because that politically that wouldn't be a
yeah. I
viable
mean, I still find
strategy,
it funny that
right?
even, to be honest, even him saying Welsh people know what it's like to be oppressed, there's no way that would get
Well,
elected in England. I'm going to say that real quick. There's
no,
no
no, no,
way.
but it isn't even just that. The
Yeah,
Welsh people like to be oppressed thing is also playing on a kind of like, yes, Welsh people have been oppressed, but realistically, they have not been oppressed as the other groups who pull
no,
the oppression card, right? Which is kind of a thing without wanting to get too political, because this episode is political and it is really layered there. I think
yeah,
what I think Rusty Davies is saying is accurately, Welsh people say we've been oppressed by the English, which is true, but they also say we've been oppressed by English to the level as, other
sure.
people, other groups, to kind of say, oh well, we're in all the same club, right? And it's like, well,
It's not quite the same. Yeah, sure.
exactly. And it's like, you can imagine, right? Rusty Davies goes to these pub environments, and you've got like a random, without trying to bring in sexuality, but you just got to, it's a clear example, right? So random, straight white Welsh guy says, I'm oppressed, I'm more oppressed than you, I'm equally as oppressed as you, to Rusty Davies in the 80s. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
well,
I get that.
I
Yeah, I see
mean,
what you're saying.
that
You turned me
you're
around
playing on
initially.
it, and you're clearly trying to do it. Well, no, I'm not saying that you're wrong either.
Yeah, yeah.
There's just so many layers to this
I think
episode, right? That you
initially
can talk about for so
because
much.
I think as well. I think a lot of Welsh and kind of just British humour in general is quite dry. So I think when I
Yeah.
first watched it, I read it more as them just kind of being like that as people.
Oh yeah.
Not in the sense of wanting to be mocking, but more just kind of like, whatever, can't be that deep. Come in and have a
Mm.
drink, and have an egg. It'd be fine. Because I think as British people as well, I think that is part of the national character of like, nothing's really that bad. Stiff upper lip, carry on, whatever.
Yeah.
it'll be fine.
You mentioned British pubs, which is I'm sure you can relate to this. When you go in, it's just unpleasant. Like there's just like a toxic environment in all of that, right?
Mm.
And I don't think that's just English pubs. I think that's just pubs.
But then I also want to
And
say,
so I
on the
think that
Welsh
kind
point
of
as well, I think highlighting Welsh folklore is something only Russell would do, and I highly respect him for it.
and it's so intriguing as well. Like it's so well applicable, and this is what I love about it in that it's critical of the Welsh culture in that front, but it is also celebratory of like the beautiful landscapes and the good people there, and just like the amazing scenery and place. It was very important for him that it had to be filmed
There specifically, yeah, and not pretend
what's
like
it
it was
called?
somewhere else. Can't remember
I
now.
was gonna say Durdle Door,
No,
but
that's
that's
the Power of
totally
the
a different
Doctor
place.
one. Yeah, that's
That's
the
what it was. Sorry, my
yeah.
bad.
No, I can't think of. Oh, what's it called? Someone will tell us in the comments, but I know where you're on about. Where the
Exactly.
TARDIS lands. It'll
Yeah,
come to me in a bit, but yeah,
and the
like
behind the scenes is beautiful.
it is. It's an absolutely stunning looking episode as well. It's really like I love the direction. This is the first of Dylan Holmes Williams, I think, and he crushes it.
Oh, he might be the new GOAT. He
I
might be
think
the new
so.
GOAT
Yeah,
of
I
Doctor
think
Director
so.
of like
Honestly,
this new thing.
I really,
He also
really
did
love him.
another BBC series called I think it's called Night Sleeper. It's all set on a train.
I need to
Absolutely
watch that.
brilliant.
I'm gonna watch. It's in my like
I only
playlist
watched
of
the
what.
first episode, but it was great.
Yeah, yeah. It looked good because I watched like a trailer for it. But yeah, 73 yards. What else was like? I was gonna say I like them. I love the montage of Ruby trying to get through life,
So effective.
but like
So effective.
she's always slightly distracted by by the woman, so she can never truly like relax. Which I really,
Oh
I think
god,
to me
the
that's one
line
of
where
the
it's like, oh, what is it? Like, is there someone else? Like, oh my
yeah.
god,
It's like well yeah
so
technically
funny.
kinda, but not in the way that you're thinking. But like yeah, I think that for me is one of the most unsettling horror concepts of the idea of there's always someone there.
Horror becomes normal.
Yeah, but also like the idea that you're never going to be fully alone, even in your own space.
I know.
There's always
It's so
someone there watching.
effective and creepy and compelling.
Yeah,
Right. I don't know if you've got sleep trouble. I've got sleep trouble. I can like barely sleep in the same room as someone, like vicinity of all that. So like I remember thinking like, how would you sleep knowing that there's someone like right outside
yeah.
at all times?
That
And
would
the way
that
she
would do
describes
me
it
as
is
well.
you can like feel it even if it's through walls, right? You can feel them looking at you, right? That's
Yeah,
how it's
that'd be
described.
horrible.
Oh, it's a great episode. Where do you want to place it?
Here,
I think you know where I want to place it.
you want to
might
place it in S? I'm
you
tempted
probably
by
want to put it
S.
in A.
I think I
Yeah.
will put it in S because I
Let's
think
go.
even though
Oh.
it is not perfect, I think it gets extra points for how much new
I'm gonna
it's
say it is
trying as
perfect.
well. I think because for episodes like this, like it is something completely fresh, and it is something with a lot to it, and it is something that you can tell he thought a lot about, and it's one that has stuck in my mind. And you just talking about it now is giving me more things to think about with it. And I love episodes that do that, I love episodes that like give me more after the fact. And that's the same for the next episode that we're going to talk about as well. I think you've convinced me into S. I think you have.
Let's go.
I think you've convinced
We
me into
won.
S.
23 yarders, we won this day.
The thing is, I was tempted by it anyway, but like it's one of those where I think I am one of the people who would have liked, just before we move on to Doctor Bubble, a scene at the end where the Doctor talks to her a little bit about it.
Just a little
bit.
explanation. I
Just a little
understand
extra
a
bit.
little clarification.
A little clarification.
Maybe
Yeah.
even like an out of universe clarification. Maybe that would help a few more people.
Yeah, or even just like a
just
similar
fully
scene
get it.
too. Obviously, I know we made the turn left comparison before, but even just a scene, like when they're at the bazaar or whatever it is, the little. Shop.
I do think that there will be a follow up in season 2.
Maybe that'd be good.
It's the only element of the story that still needs wrapping up, and he said you're going to wrap up the final bit of her story. Right?
Yeah, I'll mention it because I'll forget it. The bit in Empire of Death where they say strange things happen at 73 yards because that's where the TARDIS's perception filter is, or that's like where it like starts or something. Really like that as just a little bit extra. Ooh, interesting. Like that personally.
Brilliant.
Dot and Bubble. This is another one that I feel like benefits from rewatches personally, because at least for me,
you probably don't like it as much as I do. I love this.
I know I really like Dot and Bubble. No, I'm up there with you for Dot and Bubble, to be honest. When I first watched it, like I didn't pick up on a lot of like the microaggressions, which I think is like the main thing that like people talk about now. Again, because
it's not the only part of the episode.
No, it's not.
There's so much. No. I'm just here to say that it's not just that. There's way more. Like this episode is rich.
Definitely. And I think that's why it benefits from rewatches, because you rewatch it and you're like, wow, these people are terrible. They're terrible people. And I think it's.
I will say I did get it from the marketing that was the way they were going.
Okay. I think it's such a gutsy move to have one of your episodes be entirely centered on a character that you know the audience is going to hate. And I think it takes a special... I do as well, but I think it takes a skilled writer to be able to pull that off effectively.
Yeah, the balancing of like... not just plausible deniability, but the kind of like maybe you'll grow to like this person.
Well, the thing is, you have to...
the willingness of the audience.
You have to root for her enough to want her to get to the end, but you can't root for her so much that she's seen as a good person. So there's like a weird like the middle point that they go for, and I do think they strike it. I think it's really well struck. I think the actress who plays Lady Pepperbean is phenomenal. I can't remember the actress.
She's so nice in real life as well. That's the crazy thing.
Off the top of my head,
she's so terrible.
She is perfect in this role. What I love about this, and obviously there's the race angle, but I don't think, like you were saying, I don't think that's the only angle you could approach the story. It's definitely the most pronounced, but it's not the only one. I think there's a lot of commentary that kind of goes overlooked in this episode when it comes to class, when it comes to...
and social media as well.
Social media as well, yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Because I was going to say, this reminds me a lot of people online, particularly like certain YouTubers, TikTokers, Twitter accounts, that sort of thing, who kind of do that fake, marketed, sanitized positivity thing. You know what I mean?
Oh, hell yeah. I know exactly what you're saying.
It doesn't feel genuine. It feels like they're, like, selling something to you. I don't know how you describe it. Or, like, another example would be not social media, but it is kind of a good analogy if you're not as aware of social media. But, like, you know, like airplane hostesses, when you're, like, 9 hours into a flight, and they're still like, hello, how are you? And they're like really smiley and happy, but you know they're dying inside. That's what it feels like, and I think it perfectly encaptures what I'd like to call that toxic positivity of the internet. Of like
it's not actually just the internet; it's the toxic positivity. I hate to bring it, but it's got to be of the middle class, right? There's a toxic positivity in the middle class where people scream in silence, and you've kind of forced to be polite and forced to not say your mind.
Especially in Britain as well. I think there is very much. What I was saying earlier about that stiff upper lip type thing with 73 yards.
If you chill out in those environments with like those types of people, right, who never say their mind, and they always say what like they're meant to say. Right? And everyone kind of has like an understanding of an untold understanding of the way things are, like the clothes you wear and all of that stuff, and blah blah blah. You kind of just have to reject it all because it is so deeply unpleasant. And I feel that in Dot and Bubble so much in the way all these people talk to each other, right? All of that, the way they lie to each other as well, and also. I'm sure you can kind of relate to this, but the bubble, right? Like the thing that it represents and getting like stuck in your bubble.
The bubble is so clever. The bubble is genuinely like fantastic.
That's why this episode is so good, because it is so true to life, and also people look at me crazy when I say this. This episode is fucking funny as well. Yeah, it gets dark.
It is.
But when those scenes of like the people, it's like, Lindy, don't be silly. There's no such thing as the slot. And
it's good. And my favorite bit in this episode is when she meets up with Ricky September. And she's like, oh my god, this might be one of the best days ever. And he's just like, well, a lot of people have also died. He's like,
everyone died.
She's like, yeah, but you know, it's like, but it's so like, I think the thing about it is when you rewatch this one, and I would recommend rewatching this one,
hell yeah,
because it just every little moment is thought out in the performance, down to like her swiping away Gatwa immediately, to being a lot more immediately kind of receptive to a younger white, female Ruby. Who's more in her demographic.
But notice as well the different accents, right?
Yeah.
Ruby has a different accent to the everyone else in the...
Yeah, I've never seen anyone bring that up, but it is true.
The hub. Let's just call it the bubble.
Oh,
right?
wait,
There's like... future group where there's like 100 of them, and
yeah, like the group chat, basically.
Yeah. Right, like they all speak in exactly the same tone of voice, right, and exactly the same accent. And Ruby's got a very distinct accent that
Mancunian
makes her kind of exactly.
Yeah.
Which also is brought up in Legend of the not Legend of the Sea Devils.
No,
Legend
God, no, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. No, getting Vietnam flashbacks.
I would say this episode is S tier.
I think I would agree. One thing I love about it is the setting as well. Like, the setting of it is, like, fantastic. So well done.
It really reminds me of Paradise Towers.
Yes, it reminds... Also a bit of the Happiness Patrol there as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because I rewatched that recently, and it very much... Because I went to the BFI
did
to
you
watch
make it to the BFI?
I did in the end.
I saw your train got delayed.
Yes, I just about did, but I watched the, obviously the Season 25 collection, updated one. And they make the town, they make the place that they live a lot more.
The CGI looked really good.
It does. It looks really good. But it like Fine Time gives me a similar vibe, like because even one of the lines in like early on in this episode where everything's fine all the time, and it reminds me very much of happiness will prevail. It's the DNA of like Doctor Who is very strong in this one. It's strong in all of them. But you know what I mean? It feels like Fine Time feels like a traditional classic Doctor Who location, like a dystopian like future. The man traps,
they're the best. Man.
I mean,
they're so
I love all the memes about everyone cheering for the slugs. It's great.
But I love the design as well because it's simultaneously absolutely horrifying and disgusting and kind of cute.
Yeah, they straddle that line perfectly. It's really impressive.
And Russell T Davies' sketch that he showed of it was so funny, man. Oh my god, that guy can fucking draw. He can draw, man.
He can do it all. It's not fair, is it? These people just have talent. And yeah, the end scene is just... I mean, first of all, you've got the scene where she just completely screwed Ricky over. When I remember watching that on
that was crazy
on the screen and audibly just being like, "You bitch,
yeah,
you
terrible,
I can't believe you."
It was so awful. What is it? I noticed again. I've got to bring up like the ridiculous criticism. People were saying, "Oh my god, he looks too old," but shut the hell up, right? He looks fine, right? I don't understand why people are always picking at the tiniest little details, right? You know what I'm saying?
I didn't even think
was
of
great
that.
in this episode.
Do you know what's funny about it as well? A funny little fun fact for you. So you know how he's like the social media influencer of Fine Time, he's like the big one. The actor's name is Thomas Harris, Thomas Rhys Harris. And fun fact
Thomas
about
Harris.
me,
Harris.
That's my actual name in real life. Is Thomas Harris. So I don't want to say that Ricky September is.
You know what? It's standing for you.
Yeah,
it's you. You know what's crazy about that coincidence is that I also share the exact same name as another actor in one episode of series 1, and that's all I'll say.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's first and last name.
Oh, wow.
But I'll never say it. I'll never say it because I don't want to do a name review.
Maybe he's hiding us all secretly in there somewhere.
Oh, we're all there.
We're all there secretly.
What is it? Also, I remember I saw someone on Discord. They sent me a post. This was before I was on Twitter. It was the biggest ratio I've ever seen. It had 2 likes and it had 300.
Oh, I know the one you're on about. I know the one.
And it was of someone saying, "Am I the only one who thinks Ricky September is better Doctor than the 15th, 13th Doctor?" Did not bring up the 14th Doctor. And it's like, is this a resident of Fine Time posting on Twitter? What the hell is that?
Well, I've always found it really fascinating that, like, when people point out with the ending, she probably would have gone if it was any other Doctor. Like, if it was any other Doctor, she would have gone. But it's literally...
That's why it works so well.
Yeah, and that's what's fascinating about it, because the Doctor's never had to deal with it before. He's like, I don't really get why you would refuse help for this reason. Mm-hmm.
When they teased that scene like this was coming, I was so worried that they were going to fumble because, okay, again, I'm a Chibnall era lover. Those scenes where they addressed issues like that in that era were incredibly ham-fisted and eye-roll-worthy, right? In that they came out of nowhere and you thought, okay, well, they did this in a way that is just counterintuitive and it goes against the exact point. Here, it is handled maybe the best in the entire show.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say.
What I love about
classic
it
is... I think this might be the best of this incredibly complex topic matter. It cuts to the problem perfectly.
Yeah. What I love about it, right, is that I saw a lot of discourse on the Twitter.coms after this episode came out, being
Thank
like,
God I missed that.
Why would you make us root for the racist girl for this episode? And the thing is about it, right, is that, like, racism is one of those things that, like, it's one of those things that it isn't just you turn evil one day and you're a racist. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, a lot of the time, because obviously I'm white, so I hate to say it, but I am disabled, and a lot of the time when I'm bigoted against, it's not people being super open about it. It'll be the little offhanded things. It'll be the little, the little comments, the snide remarks, that sort of stuff. Not everyone who's a bigot is
man.
Yeah, it does.
That's
But what I'm saying is, not everyone who's a bigot is, like, evilly cackling. They're not all, like, supervillains. A lot of them, the scary part about bigotry is that it can come from anyone. Is that it is, so normal in a way. It can come from anyone, your best friend, your neighbour, whoever.
You
right?
could just hear someone saying that, right? Like, and it would be someone you didn't even expect because you just hadn't talked about that topic to that person.
Exactly, and that's the thing I like about it, is that it doesn't portray bigotry as just like, something they are just that. Like, it's something that is a product of the environment as well. It's a product of the environment, that's what I'm trying to say. Because they are in a literal bubble surrounded by rich, white teenagers who presumably come from incredibly privileged backgrounds and families, and even, like, you see the families on the screen when they're talking to the mum, who's also Susan Twist, who we haven't really mentioned at this point.
We don't need to.
We don't need to. Sure. What I guess I'm trying to say is that bigotry isn't just an innate trait people have. It's often a byproduct of either lack of education or surroundings or the people around them. And I think this episode depicts that better than I think any other Doctor episode has prior to this, probably.
I 100% agree. And what I would also say is that, it's so real, it's so visceral, and even though it's a completely alien world, sci-fi, it's still grounded, and that's what I think people want from Doctor Who.
Sure.
I think they want the world to be grounded. That doesn't mean it's realistic. Grounded and realism are separate things, right? And this kind of, like, real edge is what draws a lot of people to it. And with Rogue, I understand that there's kind of like a common criticism going around. It's like, well, was it Dot and Bubble is so real with it, and then Rogue is a lot more idealistic with it.
Sure.
And we'll get there when we get there. But I think both have their place. But I think most people will resonate more with the kind of realness, visceralness, honesty of the writing and the work, which is why Dot and Bubble is so good, in my opinion.
I completely agree with that, and I think a lot of people do criticise that they probably should, like, have, like, a black writer on the writing team for this, and I'm not going to disagree with that. Like, that's a completely fair thing.
They've only got, like, 3 writers, you know.
That's true. I mean, more writers in general would be good, to be fair, even though we are praising this run. But yeah, with all that having been said, for me at least, it's probably, like, my favourite sort of one of these stories, if I can describe it like that, in terms of taking on, like, an ill with society and crafting a Doctor Who narrative around it. It just feels perfectly organic and like really well done. And I think I found it really telling that, like, a lot of the usual suspects when it came to this episode were kind of just kind of deliberately missing the point of it.
Yeah, missing the point. Oh my god, you see some people.
But deliberately so in some cases, like deliberately being like,
I find it ridiculous.
Why is she so unlikable? And it's kind of like,
yeah, I wonder.
That's the point. But anyway, S tier. I agree. Let's put it there. Let's do Rogue. We're in the final. I'd say we're in the home stretch, relatively speaking.
Yeah, we're in the final gauntlet.
Rogue
is the episode I can talk about the least, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know why. I like the episode. There's not much to talk about for me. Where do you want to put it? I'm fine. A, B. I probably won't put it in S, but
no, I don't think it's an S. Here's the thing, I enjoy it more than Church and Space Babies. Possibly Stop? I don't know. Yeah, I think it probably goes B for me, I think. Because I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's like... I think it's better than Space Babies. But I don't think
it's anything below the surface level. That's the problem. Like, it's all good, right? Like, I can't really criticize it. I know some people, they say, oh, there's a plot hole with the gun in that he never uses his gun. I don't really care. I think it all works well.
Which gun?
Well, Rogue has a gun which he uses to take the Doctor to his ship, and then he just never uses it again. Like, he leaves it at the ship.
I didn't even think about that.
Okay, I suppose that's a plot hole, but, like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't affect how I view the story at all. The story works completely fine, and it has all these nice, neat moments, and it has all this nice, neat romance stuff, and that's kind of about it. I mean, I can't really talk about
This one is funny to me.
much else.
This one's funny to me because in many ways it feels like the most traditional RTD one of the bunch.
Yeah, like
For
the
me,
Tooth
at
and Claw,
least.
you know.
Like, if I was to, I think you could put this episode quite comfortably in, like, Series 2 or 3, and no one would really bat an eye, other than maybe, obviously, the romance stuff, which might play differently in the early 2000s. But other than that, like, the shoulder, they feel like your average RTD1 sort of enemy.
Yeah.
The cosplay thing, it's funny, but I also think they overdo
There's not much to it, is there?
They also overdo the gag a little bit, I think. Like, we get it, it's cosplay, yeah, I enjoy this one.
You kind of just watch it and you're done. I mean, like compared to Dot and Bubble, where you like rewatch it and you think about it.
Yeah.
Compared to 73 Yards, where you rewatch it and you think about it. Compared to Boom, where you rewatch and you think about it. Rogue, you just watch it and you're done.
I think it's less obviously flawed than something like Space Babies or Star Beast to an extent. In the sense of, unlike with Star Beast, where I would say, there's some lines that don't really work and the ending's a bit weird or like, whatever. I don't really think there's that, but there also just isn't like a huge amount to write home about either. It's sort of like, it's a solid episode. And you know what, that's fine. Like, not every episode needs to be,
of course,
like...
It's just when there's 8 episodes.
I love the setting.
It sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I love the setting.
I
think Rogue's a good character, and I want to see him come back. Cool. I
don't think he's coming back.
Oh, that's a shame. I think I was in the camp of people who thought, oh, he's just a Captain Jack stand-in. But actually, if you look at them, they are very different as characters. He's a lot less confident than Jack, and a lot more vulnerable and shy than Jack deep down. And he's a lot gruffer. He's not really a fun guy, at least initially, until he gets sort of peeled back. Whereas Jack from day one is very like, I'm this, take it or leave it kind of thing. Rogue has got to come out of his shell a bit more.
The performers are very different as well.
Yes, of course, yeah. And I think... And the way that they deal with their trauma is completely different. So I like Rogue a lot, and I wouldn't mind seeing him come back. Obviously, he might not.
I mean, he's not in Series 2.
Yeah.
In Series 3 is up in the air.
We shall see. But
maybe he'll be back.
What else
I don't know.
I don't really mind, because obviously I know you mentioned it earlier, like, the fact that he goes back in time and, like, people don't question it. Because I think... If you do that for every historical, that's going to get real tired.
There's a time and a place, you know what I mean? Like, it just...
It also just tonally would clash with this episode.
Right?
Yeah.
And because it's not talking about race relations this episode, this episode's talking sexuality. So you'll fumble the message and you'll dilute it all and it will all come out as mush. And I am almost certain that in an earlier draft, I'm sure that played a part in it, or there was a few lines off there and it just detracted from the overall point.
I also think... This is more of a tribute to Bridgerton than it is the Edwardian era specifically.
That kind of sucks. I don't really like Bridgerton.
I mean, I'm not like a massive fan, but I think it works fine as like just... Because the thing is, Doctor Who has always done those like genre episodes, Like, to be fair, Dot and Bubble to an extent is Doctor Who does Black Mirror to an extent.
But not to that extent.
No,
this episode
sure.
Names Bridgerton. And
quite a few times. It does feel like it mentions it a few too many times. It's like
it also aired at the exact same week that Bridgerton series.
Yeah, that was kind of wild. That was kind of insane. One thing I will say about this one that I think is kind of a shame as well. I don't think Ruby gets a lot to do.
Really liked that girl who she was hanging out with, and when it turned out she was an alien, I was like, damn, what a cool character.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like a bad problem with the episode because it got me, right? And it got me in the intended way. But I was like, oh, I was really liking this character. Oh, it turns out they were faking the whole time. God damn it. It's not a problem. It's just kind of,
I think...
Again, I don't really have anything more to say beyond the surface level, right? Like, this stuff happened. I like this stuff. And then this stuff was okay. So,
because of the 8-episode thing, I think having another episode where the Doctor and Ruby spend a lot of time apart was an odd choice, I will say. Because I get, obviously, that the main crux of this is more like the Doctor and Rogue and that, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I think that's easier to justify in a 10 or 12 episode run, harder to justify in a 8-episode run where you've already had pretty much 2 episodes where our main characters, to varying degrees, are somewhat absent.
It's kind of a filler episode.
Yeah, which is weird considering we don't really have the time for filler in a way, But I also think part of what makes Doctor Who special is those just one-off random adventures as well.
Oh
so
yeah,
I do get
no,
it.
this is good. I don't want to say just
yeah.
because I'm like saying it doesn't have a lot beneath the surface doesn't make it bad. It works really well. What I noticed, and I got a comment that pointed this out to me actually, was that this episode really feels like a fan fiction on AO3, right? Which I can see how that can bother some people. I like fan fictions, I think they're sweet. So
I don't mind
that
the
kind of
romance, in all honesty. I know some people think it's way too quick. I think
thought it was compelling enough, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I get why people like it. Doctor Who romance for me is a kind of a fine line where I mostly find myself kind of bored by it because I know it will never last. And I know this character is only in one episode. To be fair and consistent, right? Girl in the Fireplace is a beloved episode and I've never really connected with it for the same reason. Because I don't find it, I find it compelling in a vacuum, but if someone was to ask me, do you find this compelling? It's like, well, no, it doesn't really evoke any emotions within me. I'm mostly kind of just enjoying the episode for what it is and not really thinking below the surface. Again, that's just my whole point with this episode, in that it's cool moment, cool moment, cool moment, cool moment. If you sit down and actually think about it, it's a nothing burger, right? It just happened. It's filler.
Sure. No, I don't disagree with any of that. I've never been a big Doctor romance guy either, no matter what. But I think in this case specifically, I buy it more than some others because...
Yeah, me too.
I buy it more than some others because they have some shared interest, and also the dynamic feels a bit more balanced. When it's just the Doctor and a 19-year-old girl, I'm a bit like, When it's like, do you know what I mean? When it's like two space travelers, I'm a bit more like, okay, sure. Or like the Doctor River, I'm a bit more like, okay.
Well, they also are very clearly physically attracted themselves to each other the moment they see each other, right?
Sure.
So like, and that's like very obvious through the screen. You can see that.
The chemistry is really good, which I think helps between the actors.
And also just like the way it's written, you're kind of meant to think, oh, they looked at each other and immediately they were like, they liked each other, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of adds to why they found they did it so fast. I remember someone pointed out that it's kind of like I'm sure you've heard the trope because you've been on Twitter for ages and ages, but the kind of like the kill your gays trope where you bring in a gay character and then you instantly kill them. It's like, oh, they're going to be together forever, and then they instantly die. I don't think this episode is actually that guilty of that.
No, because he does survive, or at least,
He technically does, but I do understand because I've got to be honest, right? I don't think Rogue is coming back. I mean, when could he come back? Like, next year's
I don't know.
Christmas special,
I think it's possible. I'm not going to like rule it out. Anything can happen. I never thought Sutek would come back, and then he did, and then they did that. But we'll get to that.
We will get to that.
We'll get to that.
Where do you want to rate this one?
I think B. I feel a
B. I'm fine with B or A.
I think B. Yeah.
I sounded a lot more critical of this episode than I actually am.
Yeah, no, I was the same with Devil's Court though. Like, it's sort of thing like I still put it in A despite having more sort of reservations about it. I think the people who say it's like one of the worst episodes ever baffle me, and I do sort of think, all right, I think you've got some biases if you think that, because like there's nothing that egregious in this that like really deserves that treatment.
Like, it ain't that bad.
No. I was gonna say, two other things I like quickly before we move on. I really like the final sort of moments where the Doctor's like, right, moving on, let's go, let's carry on, whatever. But Ruby's like, no, stop that. I know that's just you coping, essentially. Just stop for a minute, let's have a hug. Nice. I kind of wish there was some more time for some stuff like that in like the rest of the series. Second of all, the Kylie Minogue scene's fun. Is it Kylie Minogue? No. Is it Kylie? I can't remember.
It is her.
Yeah,
the song la la la.
Yeah,
I won't do the rest because
that scene's fun. Yeah. You know, your voice is so close. It'll. I
know it's just identical.
It'll just alert the systems. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? The twist of the Ruby pretending to be a Cholda. I thought that was quite fun. I like that quite a bit. And she's like, I cosplayed. Fun. But yeah, I think I'm happy with that. So let's move on to Legendary Ruby Sunday. So this one, I think, is difficult because it's very much contingent on how you feel on the finale, I feel. Like with a lot of two-part finales. And because of the finale being the way it is, it makes me look at this episode a lot less charitably, because a lot of it is set up for the finale.
I get that.
And I'm not very big on the finale, as we will get to. I think there are moments in this that are really, really cool. Like, I really like the ending, as in, like, the cliffhanger.
Oh,
the cliffhanger, like, got me hyped.
So hyped, man.
You know, especially because Sutek, and I've said this before, was, like, the classic Who villain I wanted to see back. It's always been one of my favourites.
Same.
And I was like, oh, finally we're going to get my boy in New Who, and they're gonna do him right. And I think, you know, that whole scene of the woman being possessed and being like, there is the toy maker, the god of games, there is Maestro,
Harriet Arbinger.
Harriet Arbinger, and then she's like going through the list, and I'm like, come on. And then she's like,
all of it changes. It's so cool.
And it's one awesome true name of all, Sutek. But taking out the hype, there's not a lot to this one. I don't think.
I can't take out the hype. I can't take it out, man.
I know,
it's
but
just intrinsically there.
But the problem is, the hype isn't delivered on for me. So it's kind of like, I kind of look back at this one with a little bit of like, oh, what could have been, you know?
This was my favourite watching experience of the whole series.
Yeah, honestly, probably same. But I think that's what makes it all the more slightly bitter for me, is because of where it ends up.
The finale was a kind of like a stab in the gut, but for me, what I will say is that time heals all wounds, and Empire of Death, you're forgiven in my mind. I know most people, it's a grudge that'll be held eternally.
Yeah, I still have the grudge, I'm not going to lie.
I have forgiven Empire of Death. And so for that reason, I think Legend of Ruby Sunday is a very high-rated episode. If this was my list, right? If this was my list, I put Giggle in S, Devil's Cord in S, Space Babies in A, and I also put Legend of Ruby Sunday in S. But I know that's not going to happen on this one.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think a lot of people would already look at this and go, these are quite high, I think. I think a lot of people in like, the general fandom would probably...
A lot of those people are haters, you know.
True, but like, you know, we're both fans of this era, so like, but it's interesting because obviously we have our disagreements on stuff, and that's natural. We're like, where did you say you would put this?
I would put this in S tier. But that is not happening.
I
love this episode.
Buddy.
I don't see the problems with it.
It's just sort of all set up for me, and I think the problem is the setup doesn't go very far. So I'm sort of like... In my head, sure, but it's cheap thrills, you know? It's like...
Is it?
I think it is, because I think it's sort of like, the way I would describe it is like, imagine Christmas Eve, and your parents are like, oh my god, I've gotten you some sick shit, some really cool stuff. And then you open up your presents the next morning, and it's cold. Right?
Trash.
And it's coal or something, or it's just really bad, and they're all like from Poundland or something. That to me is like the experience of watching Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death. So whilst
I'm going to base my analogy off that, which is that I think my experience of watching Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death is, imagine you have an absolutely amazing Christmas Eve, and it's one of the best nights of your life, and then you wake up on Christmas Day and you feel like shit, right? And everyone's gone home. And you're all alone and lonely on Christmas Day, and you've got that kind of bittersweet feeling where it's like, but it's Christmas, this is meant to be the special day, and yesterday we had so much fun, why can't we have so much fun today? But then after a while, like a month later, in late January, you're like, well, at least I managed to have that great Christmas Eve. That's my analogy.
Here's the thing though, I think if I got all hyped up for Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day was awful, I would look back on Christmas Eve with a slight sense of ennui, you know, a slight sense of, look at me with the fancy word, look at that. Using ennui in a Doctor Who tier list. There we go. But like, because I got hyped up because I got hyped up by Russell for the finale, by this episode. I feel like
you've been taken for a fool.
I do a bit, and I think that does reflect on this episode a bit, because I'm sort of like, you know, all the teasing of, look.
Well, I get it. Rating this episode highly is kind of akin to like a humiliation ritual, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, I enjoyed being baited along so much. Thank you for baiting me so much, Russell.
The thing is,
like, I can understand that, but at the same time, I really do enjoy this episode, even now when I watch it.
I will say this, if we were doing this before the finale, and it was based purely on the emotions the episode made me feel at the time in which it came out, it would be like an A, probably. Not S quite, because I don't think it's quite on the level of the things we've done before, because I think there's more to the other ones, personally. But because of what happens, I can't... It's the same thing with, like, Flux, right? You look at, like, Flux, and you think... Obviously, I know you're more of a Flux fan than me, so this probably might not be the best analogy, right?
But I get what you mean, of course.
Obviously, you're going to look back on Flux worse if you think the finale was bad, right? And I think it's the same thing with this. Because they're so tied, I can't really disconnect it. So for me, if I'm being honest, right...
Would you put it in C?
I would go one step below.
Oh god, D for this episode?
Yeah, because it's a lot of setup, and I don't think...
Man, where could Empire of Death be? You'd probably put that in F, huh?
No, I wouldn't quite put it in F, because I think... I mean, we might as well do them both together, because I think they are quite linked, to be fair.
I suppose, but I would put, what is it, Legend of Ruby Sunday far higher than Empire.
I would as well, but I think I would put Empire in E. I don't think anything quite reaches F, because I think Empire still has some scenes I really like, but overall I don't like the episode as a whole. I don't think anything in this series quite reaches F for me, but if I was being honest with myself, it would go something like this. But obviously, I think because you're here, I'm willing to maybe move up. I don't know whether I could put Legendary Sunday in B. I'm going to be real with you.
You could put it in C and move Empire of Death to D. I would probably put them. I'd probably put Legend of Ruby Sunday far higher, and then Empire of Death one higher. But we'll get there when we get there. I think what I would compare it to is the Series 8 finale. In that the Series 8 finale, in my opinion, suffers from the same problem in that part 1 is all set up and part 2 lets it down massively and is kind of ass and nonsensical. In fact, I would say Death in Heaven is far worse than Empire of Death because it fails on a kind of like basic logic front.
I don't know whether I quite agree, but fair enough. I'm not gonna...
I think Death in Heaven is a story that like logically doesn't follow like track beat to beat, and it is thematically incredibly confused, and its cool moments, quote unquote, are kind of boring. And it kind of just sucks. Death in Heaven is kind of a terrible episode. But
I think
Dark Water
is way worse.
Right, is an episode which a lot of people think is much better. But I think Dark Water suffers from the problem that you think Legend of Ruby Sunday suffers from, which is that it's all set up. And it is. Dark Water is all set up. But the difference is that Dark Water is incredibly, incredibly boring. And nothing happens in it whatsoever. Whereas in Legend of Ruby Sunday, the energy is high throughout. And it's like a roller coaster. And it's constantly new things are happening and things are shifting and there's exciting music, which in Dark Water, there is straight up nothing. There is like the illusion of emotional drama. That, for me, Dark Water is an episode which is entirely pointless because if you can believe this, the two words Dark Water are not said in Death in Heaven. They are not said. The 3W Institute is mentioned once and the rest of it is entirely pointless. It has no bearing on the story whatsoever. You could skip right from Danny's death to the start of Death in Heaven and nothing changes, right? Legend of Ruby Sunday at least matters. And it's a full story where we're constantly building and there's new tense things and you're not bored by it at all. Whereas I would say, other finales which fumble the bag, part 1's are just boring.
I think, well, first of all, I'm not a massive Series 8 finale fan either, but I think you are being a little bit harsh.
Maybe I am.
Because I think Dark Water...
They're my least favourite parts of that series. I think it starts great, has a good mid, and then the ending sucks.
I would say Series 8 has slightly more... the Series 8 finale, has slightly more going on thematically and stuff than you're maybe giving it some credit for. With that being said... I think so, a little bit. But with that being said, for me, Empire of Death is just kind of stuff happening for about 40-odd minutes. And then you get, like, a nice end scene with Dr. Ruby and her finding her mum. That stuff with her finding her mum, that's great. That's really good. Like, that scene of them reuniting, really good stuff. I also love the opening 10 minutes or so where they're all getting Thanos dusted away. Where it falls apart for me, it's kind of a similar issue to what I have with Church on Ruby Road. It's that saggy bit in the middle where they're just sort of in the memory TARDIS and they're like watching Pyramids of Mars.
That's where the 45-minute format fumbles
Yeah,
massively.
but it's like they're watching Pyramids of Mars on the screens, and I'm like, really, this is how this series gonna end?
That's how series 1 is meant to end.
And that's the thing; it doesn't feel like a season 1 finale. It feels like, I don't want to be mean, but it almost feels like, when you watch like a Simpsons clip show, and they've got like, the tie-in bits to kind of explain.
You remember when the show was better? That's basically what it is.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like the implication.
And
of that
I
scene,
don't like it.
So unconfident. It's so unconfident. That's why it's bad. Even if you kind of agree, right? Like, okay, let's say I agree that the Fourth Doctor is a better era than the 15th Doctor, right? Mm-hmm. Sure, I believe that. I wouldn't want the 15th Doctor era to be saying that. The 15th Doctor era should be like, oh, well, I'm the best era because I'm making it right now, right? Rusty Davies should be thinking, well, I'm making this right now, so this should be the best it's ever been. And even if it's not, I should still say that it's the best it's ever been, to be confident.
It's sad because it seems like Sutek's only cool because he existed before. And like that's kind of the message that it sends off is, this character is cool and you should care because look at this cool story he was in before. Not look at all the cool stuff he's doing now, because to be candid, he doesn't do that much cool stuff in Empire Death. Yes, he wipes out the universe, but let's be honest, that's mostly his Susan lackeys that do that. Meanwhile, he just sort of sits on the TARDIS. I'm sure you saw the
same videos that I did, which were saying stuff like, who is Sutek? Who is this guy?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Right? And like, this episode does not do a good job of showing him off. And that's what I was waiting for in an episode, and it didn't deliver that for me.
Why I would say this episode, this two-parter, is better than the Series 8 two-parter is because, ironically, the Series 8 two-parter, part 1 is just treading water.
Nice.
And part 2 is kind of similar about what you said about Empire of Death, in that it's just things happening. The problem here being, of course, that the things happening in Death in Heaven just make no sense. I mean, there's of course Peter Capaldi jumping out of the plane to land in the TARDIS. Where does he go? He's got the TARDIS. He can go anywhere in time and space. He goes to this random.
But I also think that about Empire of Death though, because I'm sort of sat here thinking like that bit where
it's the same problem.
That bit where they're like, oh, I need to find the last bit of metal in the universe, and it's kind of like, you're
covered anywhere, bro.
It's like you're covered in rings that are metal. In fact, 2 episodes ago, we see you get a metal ring. For one. Second of all, literally, in the scene where they go to Roger Williams' office in the future, there's a big metal stand for the computer that they're using. So I'm sort of like, why is it so hard to get metal? It doesn't really make sense. Why? Also, I don't really get the whole thing of, I can't go anywhere that the TARDIS has landed because it's being destroyed, but also somehow the place...
They're able to go with new places with the memory TARDIS.
Yeah, they're able to go new places. They're able to go to Roger Williams' office, even though, because it's part of the Doctor's timeline, he's not supposed to be able to. I don't really get that.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to drop the Series 8 thing, because I was going to compare the two, but there's no point, because while I do personally prefer Empire of Death to the Series 8 finale, they are very similar and they have a lot of the same problems.
Yeah.
There's no point really comparing them, because I still don't like Empire of Death, right? I do love Legend of Ruby Sun. I will say that. I know you don't, because it is kind of like lead up to nothing, but I do still really connect with it and like it. And
I can have fun with it in isolation. I think it just annoys me because of what it goes on to be, you know?
Which is Empire of Death, which is, I'll fully go down into the trenches with you. It is a fundamentally flawed episode and has so many parts of it that I just don't like.
Yeah.
It has parts of it that I do like, right? I know you don't like the finding the last metal scene. I think that scene is actually really powerful.
I mean, I don't hate the scene itself. I'm more just baffled by that being the direction we've taken this. Yeah, I don't really get it. Like, I think it's a fine written like moment, but I'm also sort of like a bit weird, but like just a bit of a weird detour for the plot.
I think the problems for me come in. So I don't like the memory TARDIS. I know a lot of people work really hard on that prop, and you did a great job, guys. I think it looks really.
But dwfan91 hates you. He hates you.
No. I don't hate you.
No,
I hate Tales of the TARDIS. I hate that.
Oh yeah, I know you don't like that.
Spin-off.
I'm alright with it, but you know.
I think it incredibly mishandles a lot of the writing styles of the classic Who in a very kind of pompous way, which I know is pompous because I've seen Stephen Moffat and Rusty Davies in the past say that they read the War Games novelization, and when they watched the show they were disappointed by the show, which is why in the Jamie and Zoe Tales of the TARDIS, they retcon the war games by saying, and they actually didn't forget. Don't worry, guys. It felt like very
That's another thing. That's
gratuitous
another thing I
and
don't
personal
like.
to their very specific nitpicks,
Yeah.
where they kind of just enact their wishes. Basically, it was basically bad fan fiction.
You've given
which is what it
me
was.
another thing I don't like about Empire Death, though, as you said that. Because you said about how, oh, they're still alive, guys, everything's fine. You have, what's the name of the character who's the villain in this episode? Obviously, Sutek. But his moniker in this episode is the God of Death. And not a single motherfucker stays dead
No one dies.
in this entire episode. And, like,
really good.
The thing is, right, I love Empty Child Doctor Dances, that end scene where it's like, just this once rules, everybody lives. I hope you enjoyed my Christopher Eccleston.
That was a great impression. You should do it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am available. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, that's a lovely moment in isolation. But that's become the status quo of New Who, is that most people survive everything. And, like, look, I get it. It's a show for kids. You want it to be happy and nice. And I'm bitter. Even still, I think you have to have...
Well, tears are shed, but not for really any reason, you know what I mean?
You have to have some sacrifice in episodes like these. It's the same issue I have with the 2 TARDIS thing and the giggle. There isn't, like, a cost to any of this. Like,
no
obviously,
cost to the memory TARDIS either. They cut out the scene where it's meant to be destroyed.
Yeah, Ruby leaves, which obviously is sad. It's not like the Doctor's fault or anything, or it's not like, there's a huge mental cost or, like, some emotional fallout or, like, a memory wipe or anything. It's just, this is the end of this.
Did you actually find that sad? I did not find that sad at all. When Ruby leaves, when Ruby leaves at the end, I did not find it sad.
Hold on.
I know she's back. As someone who likes Ruby, right?
Maybe sad is the wrong word. I think the scene is very well played, and I think...
Did you find it effective?
Yes, I think that's probably the better way to describe it. Because I remember seeing people say, like, I saw people on Twitter the other day say, like, it's like the worst companion exit ever, and I'm like, nah, bro.
No way.
That's cap. And also, it's not even her exit because she's back. But for me, there's other things, like, I could rant about Empire Death for a while. I'm considering doing, like, a video just, like, rewriting
as well, you know what I mean? That'd be sick. I'd love to see that.
The whole thing of Sutek, the whole point of it, is that he sees himself above all other life. You watch Pyramids of Mars, and he even says to the Doctor in there, why are you interested in, like, a human? Why do you care? Like, why is it relevant to you? He doesn't get it. Like, he sees anything as, like, a grovelling insect in comparison to him. So why, on God's green one, is he so interested in this one random girl's mum?
Why would he care?
Why would he care? He wouldn't. It's completely against the character of Sutek to care. And the issue I have with the mum reveal is, because I actually like that the mum's a normal person. I'll lay that down right now. I think that's fine. I think that's a good message. I can see what you're going for, Big Man Russ. However, you can't do that and then have things like magic snow and all the rest of it, and then not really explain how that fits into it. Like, you can't... It's like having your cake and eating it too. Having her be this super special thing, but also no. The thing about... Because obviously he mentions in the comparison... Oh, no, the commentary, sorry. The comparison to Last Jedi, right? And how they reveal in Last Jedi that, like, Rey is just nobody in particular. She's not part of, like, a big dynasty in, like, the Star Wars universe or whatever. But the reason why, in my opinion, that works better than this, and I know that's controversial in and of itself, but the reason that works better than this is because the Force is something anyone can have in the Star Wars universe. In the Doctor Who universe, it is not normal for snow to just appear when people are talking about their mum. That's not normal, Russell. And the line that particularly annoys me in this episode is the line from the Doctor where he's like, she's important because we make her important. It's like, no, Russell, you made her important. You made her important to the audience.
I found that one kind of rewarding though, because it was basically exactly what I said on my Church on Ruby Road review, which is that I don't give a fuck about these mystery boxes anymore. I remember by that point, 4 episodes in, I think we had 11 mystery boxes, and people were getting mad at me. They were saying, "Oh, what, you don't want mystery in Doctor Who?" And I was like, saying, "Guys, these mysteries aren't going to be answered well, right?"
Yeah.
And so, yeah, part of me should be like, Russell, damn you for not answering this mystery well. But I've got to be honest, part of me was just like, guys, I told you this mystery wasn't going to be answered well.
Yeah.
Right?
Because so much time is dedicated to it in the series, and because it's played up to be such a big thing, and because I've been so hyped for Sutekh for so long, I come back to my analogy. It's like going down on Christmas Day and getting a stocking full of coal. You're there and you're like, bruh. And like, I won't lie, what you said about the giggle, about feeling incredibly deflated after it, that's how I felt after Empire Death. Like that
Empire
is,
Death inspires apathy within its
it does.
audience.
It really does.
Meta reading of it is basically saying, haha, why do you care? Which
And
is
the sad thing
a
is,
thing which the show shouldn't be saying at this point in time.
the sad thing is, I've seen a lot of people with season 2 be like, why even bother? Why even bother?
Why should I care?
Why should I even bother with season 2 if it's just gonna?
And I can't say they're wrong. Because,
No, I can't either.
How are you gonna say, tune in to see who Mrs. Flood is? It's like, she's just some random woman,
Yeah,
isn't
she might just be some random woman. Like, how do I know you're not going to do that? And the thing is,
Ruby's neighbor.
I think you
It's
can
called poisoning
have.
the well.
I think you can have Ruby's mum be just a person, but you don't do the Snow thing because that's just.
And you have to execute it well within the narrative.
But yeah, but the thing is, with it, for a good mystery to work, your audience and your writer need to be on the same page. They need to have the same amount of clues, essentially.
They need to know what the rules are.
Yeah, and they need to know what the rules are for the mystery to work. The issue is that, like, every bone in your body when you see the snow thinks, oh, there's something weird about that. And even the Doctor says, in all my travels, in all my years, I've never seen anything like that. So it creates this expectation, not because we've created it, but because you put it there, that this is abnormal, that this is weird. So then you can't turn around and go, no, it's just happened. Like,
that's exactly why it's so wrong, is because it punishes its audience for caring.
Yeah.
And in a time like this where Doctor Who kind of does need its fans to rally behind it, to support it, it's in kind of a tricky time. And it has been for a while. And as a fan, I'm always willing to rally behind Doctor Who, and I'm sure you are
me
as
too,
well.
Yeah.
But it is kind of just a bit strange to shoot itself in the foot like that and be like, why do you care, lol?
I think that's why I dislike it so much. Because it does feel like it's like flip the bird at me.
Who cares? Way too much about TV. Lol, 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 lol.
And it's
making TV.
And it's sort of like, the thing is, we have both been very positive, even in this video, probably more positive than a good chunk of people are on this series.
Definitely.
But looking back on it and thinking about it with you, I can't really blame people for souring on it after that finale, really. Because like what I was saying earlier...
I can't either, man. I mean, the thing is, sorry to interrupt, but I like a lot of really unpopular series of Doctor Who. I like Series 11. I like Series 13, right?
I like Series 7.
I like Series 7. I like Series 9. I mean, I basically like every series of Doctor Who, even the ones which I dislike, in quotation marks, Series 2. I still think are great, and I like them, right? Sure. It's just compared to the other series of Doctor Who. But I like these unpopular series. And when people tell me all of their criticisms, I'm not there like saying, no, you're wrong. I get it. And with this series, I get it. When people say Empire of Death ruined the whole thing for me because there's all these threads leading up to something and then they just do a rug pull and I felt betrayed, I'm like, yeah, I get it. And I'm sure you get it too.
I just don't really understand the thinking behind Empire. I don't really understand the thinking behind Empire of Death. I think
most of it was ruined in post. I think there's a lot of cut scenes. When you go through the commentary, you'll see Russell Davies saying, oh, and here's a bit that we cut here. Oh, here was an action scene that we were meant to have here.
Doesn't he even say at one point, this is where the script falls apart? Yeah, I swear he says that. He just says this is where the script falls, even by his own admission.
Yeah, he says this is where the script falls apart because Phil Collinson wouldn't produce the action scene that was meant to be there when they land in the future.
It's always the action
so there's
scenes.
A lot sitting around doing nothing, and also the Doctor throwing the whistle back to his past self was cut, even though it's like a 1 second scene, and it would have added a lot more.
Yeah, the whistle thing is so rare. I haven't even spoken about Sutekh being dragged through the vortex.
I don't mind that. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's a nice visual.
I mind, okay? I mind.
I get it.
I'm gonna say that.
This is the thing. I get it, right? Like when someone says that, I'm not gonna go, no, you're wrong. But the thing is, I think like it looks really awesome.
Like visually, VFX wise, don't get me wrong, I can't knock it. It looks great.
Yeah.
But I hate what's happening because I hate it's the epitome of something I've been building up in this video, and that is the easy easy dismissal or the easy defeat of the god characters. And this is that times a million. How do we get rid of the dog
Uses
god?
a whistle.
Use a whistle, tie a leash around it, and then fling it into the vortex, which doesn't even make any sense. Why would that kill him when he's been spending thousands of years in the vortex for a start? Don't really get that.
Oh, he didn't even bring that up.
Like, why? How does he? Oh, yeah, we didn't even bring up the fact that. Okay, quick, because we've got to mention that as well. The whole thing of him being on the TARDIS from the beginning, it's dumb. I'm saying it's dumb. It's stupid.
It's cool enough for me to look past it. I consider it soft canon in the same way I consider the Timeless Child soft canon, which is it's just there for kind of like a writer to have a cool moment. I think it would have been much more compelling and satisfying and awesome within the context of this new era, because I believe every new era of Doctor Who is basically a new TV show. If Sutekh jumped on at the start of Wild Blue Yonder,
I think that makes way more sense. I've always said this. I think that makes way more sense.
Would have been way more satisfying. It doesn't make any plot holes. It keeps all self-contained, and it just seems really awesome. I understand he's like he wants this series finale to have like a legacy behind it. At the same time, it's series 1.
You don't need a legacy.
Behind it.
You know,
you could just call it Series 14.
It would be the equivalent, though, and I've said this to friends before, it would be the equivalent of, like, say, for example, the Daleks only appear in Battle Parting of the Ways in Series 1, right? So you don't get Dalek beforehand. And then the way that they explain the Daleks is just have them watching screens on Platform 1 of Genesis of the Daleks.
Imagine. That would be crazy.
And then they get defeated by stairs. But they're not just stairs, they're, like, space stairs.
That is a very cynical analogy, to be fair, right? Like, it isn't like that.
It's not that bad, but you kind of get where I'm coming from.
I definitely do.
As someone who is a fan of Sutekh, who's loved... I've got a Sutekh mask. I know you've seen it in the background of my videos. I love this guy. I love this guy to death. He's, like, my favourite. And just to see him reduced to, a dog going for walkies, and that's how he's defeated... I felt things, and they weren't good things. And it sucks, because the rest of the series, as we've been saying, I really do like. I genuinely do. Great. And a lot of people think I'm like some kind of, paid operative, but I genuinely do.
Or you're a hater.
But I hope that this rant about Empire of Death exemplifies that I'm not, because Empire of Death...
You're just true. You're just honest.
...bothers me more than, like... a lot of episodes do. And honestly, I'm kind of talking myself into putting it back in D, but not E, sorry, but I don't know whether you want to do that or not.
Well, I'll explain why I'm more keen on these two parts. What I would say is that the more accurate analogy would be if the Parting of the Ways ends with Bad Wolf, and in the sequence where Bad Wolf is scattered across the past, it shows flashbacks to episodes from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s where Bad Wolf is added in post, right? That's kind of more what it'd be like, where everyone else is like, wait, what? And also to like classic fans, they'd be like, no, that was not there before. Stop trying to pretend.
And also, imagine if like Christopher Eccleston, imagine if that episode, right, the TARDIS is like not working, so he gets in a TARDIS constructed of all the classic sets. It'd be so weird.
I don't like the memory TARDIS. That's my least favorite part of Empire of Death. I know it's not most people's.
I like it as a set. I like it as a visual.
I think it's crap
because you hate the artist. No, I'm joking.
I hate him specifically. Of course, I don't. I love everyone who works on Doctor Who. I really do.
I know you do.
But I just think it looks ridiculous, and I think you can like almost see through it. And it's not big on the inside; it's smaller on the inside.
It is quite crammed in there. Reminds me of my office with all my Doctor Who merch crammed in. That's what it reminds me of.
My room as well.
Yeah.
It feels crap and unsatisfying, and not what I wanted for a Series 1. For a Series 14, it's more forgivable, in my opinion. Some people are never going to forgive this episode. For me, what you were talking about with The Last Jedi, right? I mentioned this in one of my videos where I talked in at length about why The Last Jedi, why Rey is no one, makes sense within the rules of the universe, and how they go really far out of their way to like explain how Rey is able to be so strong even without a lineage, because the way the Force works is that if there's like a really powerful dark side user and there's no one on the light side, that will like naturally balance out. And the reason Emperor Palpatine was so strong is because there were like 10,000 Jedi and there was only one Sith Lord. So like he was really
Yeah.
strong because that's just how it was. And blah, 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 without the Star Wars lore, right? The Last Jedi Rey's twist, the reason I thought it was effective is because it works thematically within the context of the story. And also it works within the wider lore, but mostly the story, right? With Ruby, the reason why the plot twist falters isn't because it doesn't make sense that her mum is no one, because even though she's got all these superpowers, realistically, the most realistic answer, and also the most boring answer, is that her mum is just like some random person, right?
Yeah.
Because if this was real life, like, who's your mum? Oh, it's just some person.
Just some
right?
woman, yeah.
The problem is that this is not real life, and the way it's kind of shoved in at the end, instead of interlaced into the story reveal that would have allowed for a more exciting rug pull that wouldn't have felt like such a betrayal, right? You know what I mean? Like if they show Sutek and Sutek is like, what? And maybe Sutek, like, because Sutek is meant to be a representation of the audience, allegedly, right? He could react in anger and that could show represent the audience's anger, and then the Doctor could explain to Sutek, thus explaining to the audience why it is all of this stuff is the way it is, bloody blah,
Also,
blah,
it's just
blah.
a weird choice to have Sutek as the audience surrogate, to me.
It is very weird, but again, that ties back to what I was saying before about it being just a strange time to point and laugh at the audience for caring about Doctor Who. Right?
Yes, yeah. It does come across as a bit like, read the room a bit, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it does get, I see what you're saying there, because it's sort of like, you've worked hard to get people invested again, and like, the 60th, for all intents and purposes, obviously, at this point, you wouldn't have seen, I mean, I don't know, like, no, you wouldn't have seen how any of it was received. What I'm saying is, yeah, but like, what I'm saying is, like, the 60th brought back a lot of goodwill, and a lot of people were like, oh, hell yeah, you know, I'm back on. And then, for the very next series finale to go, screw you guys, I think it was a mistake. I really genuinely do. And I do, as much as I'm looking forward to Series 2, don't get me wrong, I really, really am. I really
hope for less of that.
am looking forward to it. The idea of that happening again in Season 2 does terrify me slightly. Because I think, do you know what I mean? If they do it again,
I get it.
I worry about that. I really do. And I think...
For the record, I think, while I wouldn't disagree with any of your criticisms, I think overall I am much more positive on this episode, and that I can enjoy watching it and I enjoy talking about it. What I will say is that it did deflate me in a similar way to the Giggle. And this is the prime example. When the Giggles commentary came out, I watched it the second I found out about it. When I saw Empire of Death's commentary came out, I was like, damn, I almost don't even want to rewatch this episode with the commentary. He's going to say some dumb shit, isn't he? And then when I watched the commentary, I was like, Rusty Davies, my goat, why are you saying this ridiculous antics? You're just making me sad, talking about all the cutscenes and all of the stuff that you had to cut for time. And then at the very end, basically what he's doing in the commentary is saying, wow, man, this episode would have been really good if I was allowed to do what I wanted with it. And it's like, okay, well, why did I even watch this? It just bummed me out, right? And that's kind of similar with Empire of Death. Also, something we should probably note is we both watched it in the cinema, right?
Yes!
So that, of course, affects the general mood and vibe.
What I was saying about your Grand's reaction to, what was it? What was the episode that she...
Star Wars episode 9.
Oh, yeah, Star Wars episode 9. That, like, Homelander gif, that was my entire audience throughout Empire of Death. The only time anyone let out a whoop that entire screening wasn't even, or like cheered or whatever, wasn't even for the episode. It was for, you know, because obviously it's a double bill, Legendary Ruby Sunday, Death. You know, in the middle point, there was like a little countdown to the episode.
Yeah, Millie Gibson said something.
Everyone was doing the 10, 9, 8.
Yeah, that
like, it was like a...
It was one laugh, and it was to Ibrahim's when he was like, don't make the tea.
Yes, yeah, no, I think my audience laughed at that, and that was it. The rest of it was crickets.
Dead silence. Oh my god, it was so uncomfortable. I went with 2 friends, they hated it so much. Oh my god.
And it was so funny as well, because you had the clip of Millie Gibson as well, being like, I hope it answered all your questions. And everyone was like, no, it bloody didn't.
What I will say is I'm definitely much more forgiving of this episode. Again, I think I'll put Empire of Death higher, and
the thing is, I'm more harsh on it.
I'm fine with you pulling him down.
I think I'm more harsh on it because of how much I enjoyed the rest of the series. It's the thing of
suffering from success.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's because I came to expect more.
Or it's definitely a step down. Like in terms of what's the word? there's a lot of drafts for earlier stories. They're very polished. That's the word. They're all polished. You can tell they've gone through a rigorous process to make the episodes. Like Devil's Cord, you can tell that's an episode that's gone through many iterations. Boom, an episode that's gone through many iterations. Dot and Bubble, you can tell they've really refined all of these
Empire of
ideas
Death
and concepts
feels
to make
rushed as all hell.
clean as script. And then when you get to the finale, both of them, but especially Empire of Death, you're like, oh my god, is this like a first draft, second
The
draft?
crunch
Right,
was crazy.
Yeah, the crunch must have been insane with him writing 6 scripts.
And that's why I'm really glad. And I think
that's
we might avoid some of these issues in the future because, like, less episodes are written by him next year. And I love Russell, but I think that is for the best because, like, anyone writing that many scripts, some of them are going to, like, not be as good.
When you find out that he hadn't written the finale when Space Babies was in production because Lenny Rush was hired because of Space Babies to be in the finale, right?
Yeah.
That's the timeline of events. So he was talking to Susan Twist, the actress, to come on board before he'd written anything. So you can really tell he had a lot more time on the front end, and then when it got to the back end, that was probably when it's like, okay, well, we're going to start shooting very soon. Hand in your script, bro. Hand in the script right now, right? And so he was probably like, okay, well, I got the core bits right. I hope the rest will be okay.
Yeah, it's more like an outline to a finale than it is the finale. Kind of a similar
I would
way
say
to how...
it's not my least favorite finale, though. I will say.
No, probably not me either, mainly because... Thinking about it, I don't really like any of the Jodie ones. Other than, I like Power, but I don't know if that counts.
That counts. Giggle counts too as a finale.
Yeah, well, I vastly... Comparing the Giggle to this, for me, that's like night and day.
Night and day. Night and day.
That's what I mean. I was expecting a Giggle-esque ending for this series. What I got instead was honestly something more akin to something like The Vanquishers. And I don't say that lightly as someone who's not a fan of...
As someone who loves Flux, this is not The Vanquishers. Right. As someone who loves that series, The Vanquishers is an episode of Doctor Who that is fundamentally flawed because of just like the pure pressures put on it. Sure. Empire of Death is a well-made episode of Doctor Who.
Sure.
Regardless of whether you think it's good, it is well-made. It's got the great visuals. The performances are all good, and it clearly doesn't have to suffer from The Vanquishers, which is it's so poorly edited. Like I love that story, but it's almost incomprehensible at parts.
Yeah, this one isn't incomprehensible, but I hate when I comprehend what it's doing. I hate what it's doing for the most.
Yes,
for the most part.
Well, that's the thing. When you Vanquishers, like if you look at it on paper, right? Like it's not a very good episode, but like as an ending, it works fine. You know, all of the stuff does get resolved, even if hasty. Whereas Empire of Death, what it's saying, where if you really listen to it, it can be perceived as an insult, right? Because the villain is a representation of the fans. Yeah. Right, and it's a kind of clear middle finger to the idea of mystery boxes, which this era is already heavily reliant on. There's so many mystery boxes, and then it's big resolution to its mystery boxes saying, "Why the hell do you care about mystery boxes?"
If you wanted to do a critique of overly conspiratorial fan bases and like fan bases getting mad when their crackpot theories aren't validated. There's ways you could do that, but the thing is, you specifically catered to that audience.
If you watch the Scream film, the latest one, I think it's Scream 6, with Jack Quaid, who plays Huey from The Boys. Yeah. His character in that is a really, really good example of kind of like how to criticize toxic fandoms in a brilliant way that doesn't actually insult your core fan base. You know?
That's the thing. I think it does... It feels like punching down. It does. That's what it feels like. It feels like punching down. Like, how dare you?
As well, I wouldn't go that far. I feel like it's just misguided.
Maybe I'm being a bit half. But the thing is, like I said, I've been positive for most of the rest of this video.
Yeah, like, you're allowed to be negative. You've earned up the points. You know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I hate this
cash
series.
Them in now.
I enjoy most of the episodes in this series. You know, it's just
I enjoy all of the episodes.
It's for Well, you know, you just like things.
Full of positivity.
Exactly.
I love everything.
Exactly. But like, don't get me wrong, this is the most I've been... Well, we don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that one.
You're welcome here. You're welcome here for, you know... This is like the #1 place for Legend of the Sea Devil slander. You know that meme where it's like F, whatever, all my homies hate F. You know, that's me. That's me with Legend of the Sea Devils.
That's me, I'm crying.
Yeah, but like, bottom line, this series and like this era is the most I've enjoyed Doctor Who in a very long time. With that said, there are certain aspects to it that frustrate me because it's so close to being, I would say, on the level of the greats, era-wise, in my opinion. But because of these, fair enough. But you know what I mean? Because of these shortcomings,
go on.
It annoys me more because, like, I know it can get there. Like, I know the Wild Leonders are there. I know that the 73 yards are there. I know that Boom is there. So when we get an Empire of Death, you know what I'm saying? It sticks out.
I do.
And it feels like, I don't know, it feels unrewarding in a way.
You want to do an overall ranking of the series? So, like, would you put it in S, A, B, C, D, E, F?
What, so compared to all the others?
Well, yeah, and then I'll give my overall thoughts on the era. You give your overall thoughts on the era. Where would you put it?
So if I'm ranking, season 1 next to all the others?
Yeah, basically. Just like off the top of your head.
B.
And then B.
That immediately springs to mind for me.
Okay, that's a good one.
What about you?
So what would you say is like your actually you've kind of given your overall thoughts, but give like a kind of like closing thought overall. What did you think of the series as a whole? Above average, below average, average?
It's difficult because I'd say it's above average, but I would also say it's on the weaker end of Russell, which I think is a shame. I think the thing is, it's not helped by the fact that it's got 8 episodes, so inevitably it has less running room to kind of show itself off. Because with 12 episodes, you've got a lot of time to really flex your muscles. 8, not so much. So therefore, if the finale had landed, I would put it above Series 2. But on the basis that it didn't, I can't in good conscience put it above Series 2 because of the fact that Series 2, for all the criticisms that exist of it, it's a banger, and everything that it sets up, relatively speaking, is quite well paid off. And
the Series 2 finale is amazing.
Yeah, and like, obviously that, I would argue, has more duds in it than Season 1 in some ways, But I would also argue that it's more tonally consistent, even though the character like sort of romance isn't my favourite thing in the world. It does develop across the series, and you do feel the fallout from it, which I don't feel as much with the Doctor and Ruby by the end. And so on that basis, I do have to call it Russell's weakest, even though I'd say on an episode-to-episode level, it's stronger than Series 2. In terms of other series, it goes above... I mean, obviously for me, you know me, I'm not a big Chibnall guy, so it probably does go above the Chibnall series for me, personally. No offence to the man. He's a lovely man, Chris, but it's not for me. And it probably goes above Series 7 and 9. So it's like, it's probably
not
about...
8. But not 8.
Oh, actually, maybe 8, actually, yeah. Yeah, no, it probably would go above 8, actually. So it probably, in the end, lands about in the middle. But the thing is, I wish it was higher. For me, in my head, it is higher. But then I remember the little things, and it just sort of, I can't put it much higher. Exactly. It's
the Vietnam flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly. It's a shame, because I want it to be higher. And, episodes like Boom and 73 Yards make me think it deserves that. But then I also think about Empire of Death. I also think about, I'm not a huge Space Babies guy either. And I'm sort of it's difficult. What about you? Let's talk about you. Let's talk about you.
Overall, if we look at the tier list in front of us right now, I would raise pretty much every episode. So I would put The Giggle and The Devil's Cord in S. I'd probably keep Rogue and the Star Beast where they are, but I would put every other episode in A, and then probably Empire of Death in C, which is a pretty big... I don't know if you agree with me, but there's a pretty big gap between C and D, like a C tier episode and a D tier episode, I feel.
Yeah.
More so than a B tier and an A tier. Right?
And
I feel like
C, yeah.
Yeah, C is average, and then saying something's below average is like damn. Whereas saying above average and good, which is what I would say B and A is, right? I feel like that's a smaller leap.
Yeah, sure.
But the thing is, when it comes to season 1, when it comes to the writing and the production and the performances and the kind of emotional arcs of all of it, I think that it's not only good enough, but good. I would say this is a good series of Doctor Who.
It's a very well-made series, production-wise.
I think this is one of these things where when you're talking, when it's the context in a series 14, fan expectations naturally inflate over time because that's just how it is. To stay good and to stay relevant, you need to be getting better and better as time goes on, and you can't really afford to slowly get worse in quality. That's just how it is. The problem being, this was meant to be a season 1.
Yeah.
It's not held to the standards of a season 1 because that's just not the context of the show, and it's a misguided approach. out of universe. The show itself, as someone who, I would say I love this series. I would say I love Series 14, and I would actually go as far to say it's outstanding, in my opinion, because I think over half of it is borderline like super mega top
As I
tier,
said, on an
right?
episode-to-episode basis, it is really good and better than a lot of series, for sure.
I would agree. The problem with me actually doesn't lie with the finale. It doesn't lie with the writing. It doesn't lie with certain choices about Ruby and the Doctor's relationship, or the 6-month time jump, or the fact that the characters don't argue enough. I think the problems of this series lie entirely within how the show is being handled. I think that branding wise, it's a disaster. I think that marketing wise, it isn't as big as a disaster, but it's been mishandled. And I think format wise, the fact that it's 8 episodes long and they're all 45 minutes, right? If we're being honest, is just devastating to the kind of, when you try and compare it to other series of the show. Series 2 is my least favorite series of the modern show. It has 5 more episodes, which is almost the same like the runtime of the whole show, right? It almost has double the episodes,
Yeah.
right? It has so much more content, right? And I love what we have of Series 14, and I would definitely put Series 14 above Series 2, but I've got to consider it just because there's
I think
so
that's
much
why
more
I
content
can't.
in one
I think
series.
that's why I
It
can't.
feels like a more well-rounded series.
That's the thing.
Series 14, as a series of 8 episodes, comes out less than the sum of its parts, and that's just down to show politics, BBC politics, out of universe stuff.
I think that's the
feel
perfect
if
way of
this-
summarizing how I feel, is it comes out to less than the sum of its parts. Because the parts
If-
individually are really good.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. No, I was just saying I agree with you. Carry on.
If this series came out in 2018 and it was 12 episodes long instead of 8 episodes long, and the writing was exactly the same level of quality, there would not be these discussions going on that you hear about Ruby and the Doctor's relationship. People would not be as critical, because the Jodie Whittaker era, the way that the discourse morphed around the show, and actually it started in the Capaldi era as well, it just skewed to becoming a lot less critical. People become a lot less blindly accepting of what they see on screen, and they become more critical, as we have been, right? This is just how it happens. As fandoms grow, the way people relate to these shows changes. And at Series 14, people, they feel like they've got a lot more understanding and ownership of the show because they've been invested in it for so long. They should kind of be able to know how things work. And whereas when Series 1 comes out, people just kind of, they accept what they see on the screen. They're not as critical. And also because it's fresh and new, you don't have anything to compare it to. You just accept it at face value and you appreciate it for what it is. And as the years go on, you find more of the smaller details and you appreciate that. Series 14 has the benefit of being Series 14, or the hindrance of being Series 14, is compared to everything that came before. People are a lot more critical now after the Jodie Whittaker era. That the whole discourse there has primed people to be more concerting and more thorough, and look for every single problem and issue. And even in episodes that people generally like, there was always a feeling of this isn't quite right, which always made people go in deeper to find what wasn't quite right, to analyze negatively. Now you see in the kind of current culture of Doctor Who, a lot more people are willing to dig deep into these episodes to fully analyze why they don't work, and they go into them expecting them not to work. They find these specific things that people probably wouldn't care about much more, and they're just further accentuated by, and I can't blame fans for this, by the decisions of the higher ups, by the marketing, the air schedule, the format, all of this stuff, the branding, even, which forces people to compare it to what came before. It's a real shame.
One of the reasons I think I overall prefer the 60th specials to season 1, because I've had this conversation with you before. Yeah. Other than the fact that I think because it's 3, it's a lot more kind of tight. So there's not as much room for error, I guess. Okay, so obviously a lot of people say that it's like a 2008 tribute act. Whether you want to say that it's that or not, I feel like the 60th knows what it is.
Its identity is solidified.
Its identity is very clear and consistent and understandable. With season 1, as much as I love the experimentation, and as much as I think, making it season 1, it's not a terrible idea on paper, and getting a big streamer on it, again, not a bad idea on paper. It kind of leads to this melting pot of, it doesn't quite feel to me at least, like season 1, 100% knows what it is or who it's for a lot of the time. And I say that as someone who likes the episode on an individual level, but you look at something like Empire Death, and that is something that is very much coded as, like you said, a finale to a Series 14, an episode that very much relies on core audience knowledge. But to be fair, the core audience aren't even, big fans of a lot of the stuff that it does, but I digress.
Yes.
It's reliant on prior investment, right? But then you have episodes like Space Babies, which obviously we did our fair share of defending, but that's for the complete opposite audience to Empire of Death.
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm saying? And the thing about
1000%.
The thing about it is that when you do that, it's impossible for an audience to really have reasonable expectations, because the show is so scattershot that you don't really know what to expect. And in some ways, that's the beauty of Doctor Who, that it is so unpredictable, that it is so... it can be whatever it wants. But equally, when you look at RTD1, because it's the closest example, because it's written by the same guy.
Yes.
There's a level of experimentation there. You've got stories like Midnight Turn Left, etc., etc., etc. But fundamentally, tonally, and kind of stylistically, it's all got a pretty uniform feel to it. You know what I mean? It feels like it's in a specific world with a specific identity and a specific time and like sort of even like release in mind, and an audience, target audience in mind. With this series, the only way I can describe it is it's that old adage, it's trying to appeal to everyone, and I'm not going to say it appeals to no one, because it appeals to me, I do enjoy it, but it's sort of the thing of, do you know what I mean? It's a fumble. It's trying to make its audience too broad, and in the process, not fully fulfilling any of them fully, because die-hard fans look at it and go, alright, I mean, Empire Death has stuff that I relate to, but also you're changing it in ways I don't like, but also, but then casuals are looking at it like, okay, I get, a lot of these lighter episodes, but also, what's the deal with this Sutek bloke? And then also you have the traditionalists who are there like, why are you putting musicals in it? And so, the thing is, a lot of this stuff isn't bad in isolation, but I don't know whether it works together for the audience. I think it's an enjoyable experience week to week to do literally anything, but I think there has to be an element of tonal consistency there. Otherwise, I think an audience struggles. And I think another aspect to it is, obviously we're talking about the episodic format of the show. I think that this genre of a series, in the sense of, a kind of an ongoing series with that's largely episodic, but with, a sort of narrative arc in the same way as Bad Wolf and Torchwood and Saxon and all the rest of them, is largely extinct in modern television now. It tends to be kind of either entirely episodic or entirely serialized. And the thing about season 1 is that it's not either of those. It occupies this weird middle space, which worked when you have 12 episodes and had the breathing room to do both. I don't know whether it works with 8 episodes, where people's attention spans and people's patience is less than ever. And I feel, as much as I do enjoy these episodes wholeheartedly, most of them, and in your case, all of them, I don't know whether they fundamentally changed the show format-wise, I'm talking about now, enough for it to really resonate with the 2020s. And that's a shame, because I think it very much could have.
But for me, what I think is just kind of frustrating about it is that I see and I understand every decision they made along the way to get to where they are, and you can actually pinpoint the exact misturns that they took, and I even understand why they took them. And I think part of the reason why I like this series so much is because I'm empathetic to it, because they've been open enough with the behind the scenes for me to not. Obviously, I'm not there, right? I don't understand everything, but when Russ Davies is actually honest in the commentaries most of the time, you can tell when he's being honest and when he's saying something for a PR thing, right? But all of these interviews, all of these confidentials, which thank God Unleashed is back, by the way. Right.
Oh, I know. That's so good.
But was all of this insight? It really helps to kind of empathize with us and understand what led to each of these creative decisions. And the problem is with me is that, as you say, they just kind of fumbled the bag. They made too many wrong turns at the really vital moments, and it sucks because you keep the exact quality exactly the same, and you just change how you present it. You change the presentation, and you've got a smash hit. Because these
Presentation is
episodes are
everything.
good. Presentation is
Everything,
key.
especially in this day and age, right? Where people's minds are made up on a product within 5
They
seconds of
judge
seeing
books
it.
by their covers.
They do,
so
they
fast.
do, and it's the thing of like when an audience's first impression is Space Babies. Even you like that episode, you don't like that episode, whatever, right? That is going to colour their interpretation of the rest of it, and
especially if their first their first time they see Doctor Who is a hate video about Space Babies,
which
then it's like the real game over.
The problem I think is fundamentally I think they weren't bold enough in approaching Doctor Who for the 2020s. It's sort of like they went, let's rejig it a bit, but let's not stray too far from what we did back in the day because that's what worked. But the thing is,
there's a lack of confidence there.
But like the thing is, 2008, 2024, very different TV landscapes. Doing a Bad Wolf or a like basically what I'm saying by doing a Bad Wolf is the Susan Twist type mystery box thing.
I understand.
That's not gonna work the same way in an age where A, you've got less episodes to tell that, but B, with an audience that is online and is inherently going to be more talkative about it and is going to hype that up more. And so especially then to go, it doesn't actually really matter, the snow, that's gonna have an impact. And I don't, because I think Russell is an incredibly, and the thing is, a lot of people say Russell's fallen off. He doesn't get, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all because, as we've said here, there's so many episodes that we unconditionally really, really like and love, and I wouldn't have sat here for this long if I didn't genuinely enjoy so many of these episodes. But it's kind of the way I've described RTD2 for me, and it's like if you're a teacher and you've got a student who is like is capable of like A stars and just smashing it and just getting everything right. Not only in terms of writing, I don't even just mean writing. I mean in terms of fitting Doctor Who into the cultural zeitgeist, right? Which we know Russell can do. And like you're seeing this kid, right, who can get an A star, but they're just sort of coasting along at like a B. And I'm not saying it as like an effort thing, because I do genuinely believe that everyone in this production is giving it their all, and it's not that at all. But I think that's what's frustrating to me about this run, is that I really do enjoy it, but I feel like I know it can be more than it sometimes is. And that's what's frustrating about it. I feel like Russell is normally so on the ball when it comes to understanding the TV landscape, and he knows this world very well. He knows the TV industry very well, and he perfectly figured out how to reinterpret Doctor Who, this series that, hadn't been on for like years at that point, and was completely reinvented from the ground up, new format, new everything, right? He completely managed to reinterpret the show for a 2000s audience, and I think my assumption was that he was going to do that again, but for the 2020s, and in some ways he has. Shooty and Millie feel very much like a 2020s TARDIS team, and that's good. It should feel like that. I know a lot of people will probably say that's bad. I disagree. I think you've got to have that, because that's what keeps Doctor Who alive, right? But where I think he's fumbled it is in it's stylistically. It feels, and it's tonally, and it's structurally. Structurally, the structure, other than the fact that we've got less episodes now, is identical to how it was 15, 20 years ago. I don't think that was right.
I gotta make that Doctor Who format video, because I'm just saying, right? It's difficult to conceptualize now because you haven't seen it. But imagine there were 20 weeks of Doctor Who, and they were all 20-minute episodes.
You just saying that got me like.
I mean, it's just one of those things, because it just seems like a slam dunk right now, because they're like, okay, we're struggling with money, right? BBC budgets are going down. That's why we went to Disney, right? What's the best way to both increase, that if you go to 20-minute episodes, that's actually less runtime than 8 45-minute episodes. So you lower the runtime, but it's the illusion of increasing it, and you fix all of the format problems, and you say, oh, well, we don't have as many smash out of the gate great ideas for, say, 8 stories, but they definitely do for 5, right? Imagine there was a 4-part, 20-minute shooting out a Dalek story as the finale to this season, and you call it Legend of the Daleks, Legend of Ruby Sunday Daleks, and it's 4 parts right there. It would just leave the era feeling a lot more full. Whereas what I think, when you look at this list and someone tells you that's a whole era of Doctor Who, you think, wait, what?
Yeah.
The full thing?
It almost feels paltry, doesn't it?
Yeah, you eat half a meal, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why the 20-minute format would be so beneficial right now is because it accounts for all of the issues plaguing the behind the scenes, and also fixes all of the kind of like current formats and leaves the audience feeling a lot more full and satisfied, while also being something that we know works, because Doctor Who's inherent format is the 20-minute format. It works really well in those short bursts. And as well, there are like a million other 20-minute shows coming out every year which are like massively successful. Wasn't like Invincible 20 minutes long as well? That came out like a little while ago. Right, like obviously every single anime, right? I feel like there's been like a million shows that have come out. Ted Lasso. I've got a list of like a screenshot of a collage of a bunch of shows that are all 20 minutes long, to show that it isn't just Doctor Who wouldn't be the only 20-minute show.
Yeah.
And you could have long season lengths without long run times. And I just feel like it's
okay.
The
Hear me
clear
out.
open goal. Yeah,
If I was like a skeptical TV producer, imagine I'm Mr. BBC right now.
Yeah.
How would you feel about like a similar format, but it's like each story is 2 episodes, but it's half an hour each?
Nah, that's shit, because you've got to have more padding, right? The problem is the 20-minute format is perfect because it's got the hook, it's got the set piece, and then it's got another set piece cliffhanger, right? And there's that introductory phase of every part of each 4-parter, which means that what would be 10 minutes of world building in one 45-minute, it doesn't quite work the exact same in a 2-part modern story to a 4-part classic story. But what basically happens is you get 40 minutes of world building. Yeah, 40 minutes of world building in 4 20-minute episodes. Whereas in one 45-minute episode, you get about 7 minutes of world building, right? Which leaves the worlds feeling a lot less grounded, which leads the stories feeling a lot less impactful. They just kind of come and go, right? And you notice that a lot with Modern Who. That's kind of my big problem with Modern Who, is that a lot of the stories, they just kind of come and go, and they don't leave any impact.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like I ended this series and went, "Oh, that's it." Like,
yeah,
that's it.
I think I could obviously talk about this format for
but it feels like the series just gets going and then it's over. Like,
I think the thing that really got me started is I wouldn't be going on about this if it wasn't a series 14, but the fact that season 1 and series 1 are the exact same format. You know how you easily differentiate them and make it so it's impossible to compare the two? You make this new season 1 a totally different format, because you can compare 73 yards and turn left, which I don't think is the best comparison, but you can make that comparison, right? If 73 yards was a 4-parter and they were each 20 minutes long, hell no, you can't compare that to Turn Left. It's just too incomprehensibly different. Now, I know it's hard to imagine, right, like a story like that as a 4-parter, because it would have to be entirely changed from the ground up, because obviously, structuring the stories and conceptualizing them is so different with a different format in mind. But it's just one of those things where it leads to a more full and rich experience.
It would also
with less money,
just to give you
and differentiating it.
Give you a point in your favor as well. It would stop the instant judgment of episodes the moment they come out, because there would be an understanding that there's going to
be future ones.
There's going to be future ones, and you've got to let the story set itself up as well. So people wouldn't immediately be going, "Oh, this is bad," after watching it once.
And also, when people think the 20-minute Doctor Who format, where they're 4 parts each, a lot of them think, "Oh, slow paced," because classic Doctor Who is slow paced. You could easily make it fast paced. You could easily make it the same pace as a show like Attack on Titan. And I haven't watched it, but Jujutsu Kaisen, that's like immensely popular, right? And that's the exact same format. My Hero Academia, I watched the first season of that, like incredibly compelling story, really addicting, bingeable. I think in my video I showed Attack on Titan cliffhangers, because like I showed reactions to Attack on Titan cliffhangers and how people just got so animated, and I thought that could be a Doctor Who cliffhanger. People could be getting that animated, Doctor Who cliffhanger. It's got the potential. These stories have the potential. The writing, I don't think, is the problem. And I know you don't like Empire of Death, but if someone said to me, would you rather change the writing of the episodes or the release schedule of the episode, just the release schedule, I'd rather change the release schedule.
No, I hear you.
Which I think goes to show where my priorities are.
I think the thing is, obviously, I have my issues with certain aspects to, like, just creative choices they've made, really. Like, I do wish there was a bit more friction in the TARDIS team. I do wish, Empire Death did resolve things more satisfactorily. But fundamentally, I think what you're saying about the format not being evolved and kind of the style not being, as consistent as it probably should be and it not being as confident, that's just added on top, Do you know what I'm saying? And that's why season 1 ends up in the middle of the pack for me, because fundamentally, I love a lot of the episodes. In fact, I'd say it has a more solid run than a good few series, even some of the good ones. But because it's less confident, because structurally it isn't conducive to the stories that it's trying to tell, I do think that docks points for it. And I do think that in an ideal world, Doctor Who would just, like you said, either do what you're saying or just have more episodes in general. And I know that that's hard in today's landscape. And also we've got to consider that the BBC are probably mandating that it fit around certain schedules as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's that aspect.
That's kind of the big thing. There's like the time slot, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, why don't you just do this? Obviously, obviously it's a massive change. And you'd really have to be confident.
But I think if there was any time to make a change like that, it was now. And I think with hindsight, if they were going to make it season 1, they probably should have, even though overall, to round it off, I do enjoy this era, but it's like one of those things where, to quote the 10th Doctor, I could do so much more, and it's sort of like, you can see it, and even, you're saying, like, you look at the cliffhangers and, like, imagine the reactions to that, and I see what you're saying, and I also just think about it, and I think about how big serialized television has gotten recently. And I think about how big the reactions were, hindsight is 2020 and everything, and obviously now people probably would have been a lot less favourable to the show, people were probably a lot less into it. But like, you look at something like WandaVision, right? Which is a serialized story told week to week, but with, different aspects each week. And for good or for ill, people were hooked on that constantly. There was constant theorising. And my personal belief, obviously your belief is the 20-minute idea, my personal belief would be, I think we need to go closer to a Flux-style format. Because I don't think that format was necessarily the problem with Flux. I think the problem with Flux, for me at least, was execution. I think the idea of a more serialised Doctor Who series would probably work better if you are constrained to 8 episodes. Because I don't think you have the room, quite frankly, to tell compelling episodic stories and do a series arc and all the rest of it in 8. I think it ends up squashed. I think it ends up condensed. If you focused on one overarching narrative, you can still have different adventures, but have them link in. I think you would increase audience retention in terms of, like, people would want to come back to see the next chapter. You would make, obviously speculation would be mad, because it always is, but especially because if there's one narrative everyone's following along to, it makes it easier for, like, people to binge, which, obviously I know you say you don't binge, but binge culture is a massive part of the way
this series is not bingeable. No,
it's really not. It's much more individualized in the sense of, when I watch season 1, I don't think I've done it all the way through. I mean, I've done it once, but, like, I tend to just pick out an episode I like and then watch that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Not bingeable.
Whereas
episodes.
If it was a bit more serialized, and I'm not saying it needs to be like, one story stretched across 8 episodes. I'm saying just have something a bit more overarching, like a WandaVision, like a Loki, for example, right? Where that's one story with different locations and stuff and different characters you meet along the way. But it works, Obviously, I'm using Loki and I'm using WandaVision. Obviously, there's better shows out there. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
Stranger Things.
I'm not saying Doctor Who should be a Marvel show. Frankly, I don't want that because I don't think a lot of them are very good. But what I am saying is, because it's very clear to me that Russell and co went into this series wanting to kind of take some cues from the streamer handbook, right? You know, the Bridgerton references, the Black Mirror episode. But if I were them, the lesson I would be taking is not that. The lesson I would be taking is, look at all these stories that people are hooked on week to week to week to week to week. And this series, whatever you may think about it, whether you love the episodes, whether you hate them, don't really do that, you know? And I think if I was in the meetings, I'd be like, I think you should have, you know, if it was me. And maybe there's every chance. I mean, I might not because it was filmed back to back, but it is possible that season 2 is more interconnected. It's a possibility. We don't know it yet. Series 6 was more interconnected than Series 5 was. And in fact, something like Series 6 is kind of the perfect example of what I'm talking about. There were individual stories in Series 6, but it was a lot more serialized in a way.
I think Series 7B is the more apt description.
Probably.
Because that's,
but I'm using Series 6 because people probably are generally more positive on Series 6.
I feel like most people are still positive to 7B.
I
7B
like
is
7B.
The same because it's got the companion character arc. It's 8 episodes long. It's got the same structure of story arc and thing. But Series 7B is what Season 1 is. Series 6 is what Season 1 should be, is what you're saying, basically.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying, because you look at it and you're like, you know, that's an overarching story, you know, the whole thing around Lakes. It all comes back to River Song and Lake Silencio, right? And the whole series is basically, how do we get back to this point? That, for me, would work so well in a modern context. And we you know, Moffat, my goat, was ahead of his time. If you look at the... I did a video on the original plan for Series 5, and the plan for that was we open on a Doctor on the verge of death, and then the rest of the series is basically us figuring out how we get back to that. Very similar to Series 6.
How we got there.
And that is a compelling through line for a series. It is. People would be like, oh, it would immediately get intrigue. It would immediately get people speculating. It'd be me and you. It'd be great.
Yeah, hell yeah.
People be theorizing. And I think they've missed a massive trick by doing we'll have a slow drip feed week to week to week thing, because I don't think that's how people are consuming it anymore. I really don't. And obviously, you can mourn that if you want. And I know Russell is a very big fan of that format, and I understand why. But if you want to do Season 1, I think your format needs to reflect that. And I unfortunately just don't think it does. And I don't think I think the way I can describe it is, I think Season 1 took baby steps towards being a new age when it should have taken the strides. You see what I'm saying?
How I would describe it is Series 14 should have been Series 14, and if it did this, then we wouldn't even have to be having this conversation.
But I
1000% agree. It's Abby's first reboot, you know what I mean?
I also do understand the idea, though, of wanting a Season 1. I do get that. I don't think wanting a Season 1 is an inherent bad, in the sense of, like, let's face it, the new show was getting a bit convoluted, and also it had been on, you know, it had been on consistently for
18 years.
18 years at that point. And comics do it all the time. I think comics are a really good analogy. Things are getting a bit stale. Things are getting a bit, you know, confusing. Let's just have a new #1 comic book and start again. I don't think that's a bad idea, but you've got to put in the effort to make that difference. And I don't think it's there. But to wrap everything up, thank you so much for coming on, because I've just realised I've just looked at the runtime of this and it's approaching 4 hours.
Oh my god. So it has been absolutely awesome.
It has.
I've loved it.
It's been amazing. A really good time. I'm going to have a great deal of time editing this video.
Oh no.
That's fine. It probably will be quite a simple edit at the end because it's so long. But yeah, I think overall, I'm quite happy. I know obviously you would probably put some things a bit higher.
I'm happy too. I love this list. I think this is a great list.
I think you would put something a bit higher. Maybe I'd put like the finale and stuff a bit lower.
Maybe space a bit
lower. But like, overall, I think it's nice to talk to someone who is just like actually enjoying the show as well. Like, even though we've moaned a bit.
We're both real. You know what I mean? We're both honest about the show. I think that's what's so refreshing, is that we don't go in both wanting to hate it. We also don't go in both wanting to love it, but we just so happen to love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's also like as well, you know, when one of us doesn't love something, we're not afraid to say that we don't love something as well. It's not like...
Exactly.
But yeah, thank you so much for this. If you're still
Thank
here,
you so much for having me.
no worries. If you're still here, audience, congratulations. It's been a very long video, but maybe you had this on in the background, doing the dishes or something. And if that's the case, I hope you had a good time doing the dishes. I will leave dwfan91 channel in the description below. Go subscribe. Go show all the love. And
like this video too.
Anything else you wanted to plug?
Have a great day, guys.
That's great. I love that. Love that. Very, very, very modest. We love that. I'm not going to be modest. Subscribe. Like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in a bit. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.